Lyanna Stark felt the chill long before dawn crept across the sky, above the wind-swept dunes of Dorne. Even here, beneath a canopy of cloudless indigo, the ghost of winter rode with her, a shard of her northern heart that refused to melt no matter how hot the desert nights grew. She lay awake in the makeshift camp outside the Tower of Joy, listening to the muted snorts of Rhaegar's silver stallion, to the rustle of morning sand over canvas, to the quickening of her own breath as another dream of gods made fire faded into sweat-damp reality. In the dream, she carried a torch across a stone floor slick with oil, every step ringing like steel on steel. She had walked those endless turns until the air tasted of ash and tears, and the torchlight danced against a wall of polished black. Door waiting at the end had been iron, seven-pointed and carved with the soaring arms of House Targaryen. When she pushed it open, something older than fear urged her onward. Aerys Targaryen sat on a throne of iron knives, shadow-thin and gleaming wet. He had looked up at her with owl eyes, and smiled, because she wore no armor and carried no blade. Yet she advanced. She would not stop. Lyanna dreamed it every night now, and every morning she woke with the sense that the dream was not merely dream, but premonition. No, invitation. A door half ajar, waiting. Rhaegar emerged from his tent as dawn bled pink across the horizon. Sand had collected in the grooves of his silver hair, catching the dawn in tiny sparks of rose gold. He was beautiful in a way that still unsettled her, for beauty was a bard's word, and she had lived her life in the cadence of hooves and cold river spray. His beauty was too still, too perfect, as though the gods had poured all their cruelty into sculpting him. "Your rest was troubled again," he said, his voice low, belonging to twilight more than morning. She rolled her stiff shoulders. "I know what must be done, Rhaegar. Sleep is a luxury for girls who stay at home and embroider, not for wolves running south." He studied her face with the mournful contemplation of a man who sees a narrowing road. Lyanna saw the argument gather in him like thunder. He would urge patience. He would calculate. He would speak of prophecies traced in stars and songs still unsung. She was done with songs. Instead, he said, "If it goes wrong, there will be no escape from his pyres." "Then we will burn," she answered, and felt the first spark of certainty ignite behind her ribs. Better to burn than to leave him alive. When? The plan had first taken root on the night Lord Rickard Stark and Brandon were summoned to King's Landing. Lyanna could still taste the salt of Harrenhal's lake on her lips, the echo of Rhaegar's harp between the oaks, the crown of winter roses rustling in her hair. Word reached her in the morning, her father accused, her brother demanding justice, the king demanding submission. And then, silence. Rhaegar vanished, swallowed by duty, by prophecy, by the obligations of the blood he bore. His father locked himself in the Red Keep, torching traitors real or imagined. Allies splintered, houses gathered on the winds. And Lyanna listened to the rising storm as though it were a brutal lullaby meant only for her. Each rumor felt tailored to pierce her. Brandon strangled by a noose of his own boastful temper. Lord Rickard roasting in golden steel. Eddard calling the banners. Benjen too restless with vengeance to think straight. She could not weep. Weeping froze the limbs, slowed the mind. Instead, she stole Rhaegar's books by lamplight. The dusty annals of Maester's Keep, the conspirators' letters, the proven routes into the Red Keep that had survived a dozen rebellions. She studied them until her eyes throbbed and dawn peeled up the horizon. There were ways in and out of the castle no guard remembered. Forgotten wells, nooks left unbricked after Maegor's masons were hanged to preserve the secrets. The Mad King trusted fire, not stone. He believed the walls themselves loved him. She would carve her path through those walls on feet, silent as falling snow. Rhaegar returned weeks later, silver armor dented from unseen skirmishes, prophecy flickering in his dark eyes. He spoke of a tournament never held, of a song of ice and fire, of a newborn dawn to come. But he did not speak of how to free a father already dead, a brother already dead, a realm already slipping into ruin. "Your father's madness cannot be staunched with parchment," Lyanna told him as storm clouds knotted over the desert. "No prophecy seals the flesh of the innocent." "I know," he said, "but to murder a king, to save 7 kingdoms from wildfire, The shout cracked her own voice. To save my brothers from a war they cannot win alone, I will be the dog that bites while lions sleep. Nah. Rhaegar looked into the dust at their feet. It was my burden to bear, not yours. I should have ended it at Harrenhal. Yet here we stand. She placed a hand upon his cheek, felt the stubble there, real and human and utterly fallible. Let the songs remember that a prince loved his people too much for murder. Let them remember a lady who had no such qualms. And about what? They rode west in the shadow of mountains, cloaked in trader's garb. 3 sworn swords accompanied them, none above suspicion, yet each bound by the silent oaths taken beneath that torched Dornish sky. Lyanna practiced dagger throws nightly by the campfire, slicing plums mid-air until seed and skin fell in neat halves. Her breath steadied, her heart slowed. She felt her body reforge itself into something leaner, colder, meant for quiet corridors rather than tourney fields. In Old Town, she bartered Rhaegar's ruby-studded cloak for a vial of stranger's milk, a thick, colorless draught used by faceless men to dull the pulse before a kill. Too much and you will die, the apothecary warned, eyes narrowed at the northern girl with steel in her voice. She answered, too little, and I will fail. The trip north along the Rose Road took 17 days, days of mud-caked boots and rain that tasted of rust. At Bitterbridge, they heard Ned's banners had begun to unfurl in the Vale of the Trident. Storms, and muttered Dragon's Bane. River Run hosted vultures dressed as lords. At night, Lyanna slept beneath a tarp of flapping wool, dreaming of hallways slick with oil, torches sputtering in a breathless dark. She could see every link of every chain she would climb, every step in the spiral that led to the king's own solar. Each dream sharpened the path. When King's Landing finally emerged from a gauze of sea fog, word walls glinting, rookeries churning, Lyanna felt oddly calm. The rebel armies were still weeks away. Panic had not yet collapsed into full siege. She entered the city at mid-morning disguised as a Septus attendant, hood low over her face, calloused hands carrying jars of fragrant oil for the great sept of Baelor. The gate guards barely looked twice at a minor holy convoy. Inside the city, the scent of boiled leather and tanners lay mingled with incense and tide mud. Narrow streets coiled like spilled entrails. Whispers followed her, of horns sounding in the reach, of lions growling in the west, of wolves howling at the neck. Lyanna kept her gaze forward until the red keep loomed above the Blackwater, a nest of crimson stone and promise. Wow! The secret entrance lay beneath an overgrown arch in the outer curtain wall, choked by nettles. 2 of Rhaegar's sworn swords distracted patrols on the main rampart, while Lyanna slipped through the archway, knees scraping rock. Beyond stretched a passage narrow as a coffin, dank with brine. She crawled half-blind, guided by the memory of Rhaegar's vellum sketches. Twice she paused to breathe, the stranger's milk ghosting through her veins, slipping her pulse into the measured hush of snowfall. The tunnel ended in a chamber sealed by a rusted grate. Lyanna pried one iron bar loose with a knife hilt, squeezed through and found herself at the back of a forgotten storeroom, steeped in dust. She traded her rough-spun robe for a lost maid's dress she had purchased in Fleabottom, undid unremarkable, and bound her hair beneath a linen cap. Then she waited. Footfalls approached, a scullion fetching casks of Dornish red. Lyanna pressed herself behind a stack of mildewed linens until the boy passed. Silence settled, broken only by the distant clank of chains and the soft drip of water and stone. She pushed open the storeroom door and entered the belly of the Red Keep. Passage after passage wound upward. She moved like mist, ducking behind pillars when night strode past, merging with servant knots ferrying platters to the kitchens. Always she climbed. The stranger's milk made every sound distant, as though heard through wolf's wood fog. Her mind floated above her body, noting and discarding the danger with the same detached clarity she reserved for horsebreaking. The fear was real, but it had no teeth. A guardroom barred her path just below the royal apartments. Torches burned along the walls, painting the guards' armor molten orange. She counted 4 men, 2 awake, 2 dozing. A single corridor branched right. Rhaegar's map had promised a hidden door there. a narrow slit behind a tapestry of Aegon the Conqueror. If she could reach it, she would step into the servant's crawlspace that skirted the king's private solar. Lyanna steadied her breath, recalling the cadence of Brandon's sword lessons back at Winterfell. Move on the inhale, strike on the exhale. She stepped into the torchlight with the shaky grace of a startled maid. One guard jerked his spear upright. "Girl, these halls are..." She let the dagger fly. Silver-streaked, thumped into his exposed throat. Blood misted. His partner shouted, lunging. Lyanna darted beneath the spear thrust, another blade already in hand. She felt its hilt connect with ribs, felt bones grind. He crumpled before his cry fully formed. The room spun in slow turns as the stranger's milk muffled the carnage. She retrieved her first dagger, wiped it on a fallen cloak, then dragged both bodies behind a screen of barrels. The dozing guards never stirred. She left them breathing but bound, whispering an apology only northern gods could hear. Beyond the tapestry, a sliver of darkness beckoned. Lyanna slid sideways, pressing shoulders to stone. The crawlspace climbed steeply. At its apex sat a narrow lattice window opening to the king's solar. Through it, she glimpsed the Mad King hunched over a brazier, coaxing a scroll into flame. His hair clung to his scalp in greasy threads. He muttered to himself, each syllable punctuated by the crackle of burning parchment. She watched, mesmerized by the lunatic rhythm of his voice. He spoke of dragonfire beneath the city streets, of wild wyverns in vaults of the dragon pit, of traitors in crimson cloaks and smiling wolves too far away to bite. Lyanna's hand tightened around her last dagger. The one Brandon had gifted her upon her 12th name day, its staghorn hilt polished smooth. She studied his back, searched for the best line, but something tugged at her heart, a sorrow as old as the crypts. She thought of Eddard's rain-soaked eyes the last time she'd seen him, of Benjen's shy grin when she taught him to ride, of her mother's hands smoothing her hair before a harvest feast. All those memories braided together into a single word. Enough. She braced, nudged the lattice. It lifted on silent hinges. She slipped through, feet alighting on plush carpet. Eris did not turn. The brazier hissed, smoke curling like black tongues. She advanced. Her dagger was a shard of moonlight in the gloom. When she was 3 paces behind him, the king's tirade broke. He sniffed the air, head cocked. "Who walks in shadows?" His voice rasped like a broken bell. "Come forth, ghost." Lyanna's breath caught. Between heartbeats, the dream unfurled exactly as before. Torchlight, oil-slick floor, the smile of a dying god. She could almost feel Winterfell snow through her thin slippers. She drew the dagger across his throat. One clean motion, the exhale of a promise kept. Aerys' cry gurgled into wet ruin. He clawed at the wound, veins of crimson spattering the brazier. Lyanna guided him to the floor, her knees buckling under his sudden weight. His robes soaked her sleeves hot and metallic. She pressed 2 fingers to his lips as they quivered. "For Brandon," she whispered. "For father, for the realm." His eyes rolled white. Silence, a true silence, deeper than midnight, fell upon the solar. Lyanna's pulse trembled back into her ears. The stranger's milk dulled her sense of victory. She felt only a vast, exhausted quiet, as though 1,000 bowstrings had finally slackened. She turned to extinguish the brazier, but something in the flames caught her eye, a half-burnt scroll bearing the red wax of House Lannister. She plucked it free, smothered the embers under her palm, ignoring the sting. The seal cracked, revealing a neat, flowing script. She read enough to know it was sealed orders for Jaime Lannister. Orders to stand guard outside Aerys' chamber, at dusk on the morrow, alone. She tasted ashes. So Rhaegar had been right. The king suspected his own sworn sons. Or he meant to. She could not decide whether it mattered anymore. Oh my Arwen near him. Escape required as much ice in her veins as the kill. She wiped her blade, wrapped it in linen, and slid back into the crawlspace. The corridor outside the guardroom was still empty. She retraced her steps, moving faster now. Every corner might sprout a pair of lion-red guards summoned by a ringing bell she had not heard. She slipped through shadows, heart thudding against ribs. The 2 dozing guards awoke groggy and confused. She set a wineskin laced with poppy nectar beside them. Let the morning blame their stupor. Let them swear they never saw a wolf in maid's garb. Swift feet. Down the stairs past the storeroom into the tunnel. The tide's breath swept her hair back as she crawled. Sunlight winked at the far end. Outside the archway, gulls cried over Blackwater Bay. She straightened, tasted the salt wind, and realized the blood on her sleeves had dried stiff. She untied the linen cap, letting hair fall in wild waves. The city roared around her, unaware, unbelieving. Somewhere bells tolled the 6th hour. She made for the rendezvous. Rhaegar waited in the shadow of an abandoned granary near Aegon's high hill, cloak pulled low. When she appeared, he tensed as if to run toward her, then mastered himself. "It's done," she said, voice raw. His eyes widened, not with relief, but with something else. Dread, perhaps, or awe. He reached to touch a streak of blood on her cheek, then thought better and drew his hand back, as though fire might leap from her skin. "We must leave the city before the gold cloaks tighten their net," he managed. She nodded. "Your sworn swords are waiting at the Dragon Gate." They moved through alleyways, humming with midday chatter. News of the king's death had not yet spread. The city still buzzed with petty grievances, market haggling, seamen brawling, septons preaching. But tension lay beneath, a hidden twang like a bowstring drawn too far. At the gate, a pair of red-cloaked Lannister outriders argued with the watch captain. Rhaegar slowed, cursing softly. "My father's lions already sniffing." Lyanna assessed the crowd. Another way. They veered down a flight of steps into the bustling maze of the Hook, then across a fish-reeking dock where bribes flowed as freely as ale. A riverman agreed to ferry 2 pilgrims upriver before dusk, no questions. Only when the Blackwater's green-brown churn swallowed the docks did Lyanna allow herself a shakier breath. Rhaegar sat opposite her in the creaking skiff, eyes reflecting the oar's steady rhythm. "Who will they blame?" he asked quietly. "They will blame whoever they fear most," she answered. "Perhaps the lions, perhaps the wolves. Shall. And you." She looked at her hands, still stained. The tide breeze fluttered her cloak like a banner of truce. "I am a shadow. Let them hunt phantoms." Rhaegar's throat worked, words unsaid. The skiff slid beneath the looming arch of the river gate, leaving King's Landing to shrink behind them like a feverish dream. A single plume of black smoke curled above the red keep. Whether it rose from a brazier or a pyre, Lyanna could not tell. Night fell. They camped beneath willow trees on the riverbank, torches masked by a low earthwork. Rhaegar busied himself with maps, muttering of alliances, of how to stay the bloodshed now that the realm's mad dog lay dead. Lyanna sat apart, cleaning her daggers, listening to the river lap against roots like slow applause. A creak in the dark. She tensed, blade in hand. Rhaegar approached, cloak shedding dew. "Dewadi, will you ever regret it?" he asked. She traced the dagger's edge with her thumb. "I will regret every life war will still claim." But his was already lost to madness. He forfeited it the day he burned my father. He knelt beside her. "The songs will not know how to sing of this. Then let them stay silent." She leaned back against the tree, exhaustion pooling. "I am not done, Rhaegar. The realm will split open come dawn. We must sew it shut before the blood poisons the soil." He caught her hand, calloused fingers warm around hers. "You led us both down a path from which there is no retreat. I know. And yet," he lifted her knuckles to his lips, "I fear it less because you walk it with me." Far to the north in the vaulted hall of Winterfell, Eddard Stark stood before a hearth whose flames danced too bright for spring. Raven's wings beat at the shutters, a letter sashayed in his hand like a serpent. He read the words again. "The king is dead. Assassinated." Uncertainty gnawed at every line. Who wielded the knife? Lannister whispers pointed at Jaime. Southern rumors spoke of Dornish daggers. The Reach murmured of faceless killers. Ned felt the winds of winter rising, in his bones, in the moaning weirwoods. He wondered where Lyanna was, if she still breathed free air, or if crowns already weighed upon her shoulders. He remembered her laughter when she raced across the Wolfswood. remembered her oath to never wear a southern dress again. He prayed into the flames, though he did not know which gods might listen. Perhaps none. Perhaps all. Dawn scattered its pale coins across the river. Lyanna stirred to the scent of damp reeds and horse sweat. Her limbs ached, not with remorse, but with the brutal satisfaction of completion. She stepped to the water's edge, washing the last crusts of blood from her sleeves. Ripples broke her reflection into shards. Wolf eyes, wind-tangled hair, a mouth set in lines older than her 17 years. When she returned to the camp, Rhaegar had already saddled the horses. He handed her a folded strip of parchment. "My allies must know the truth before rumor swallows it." She glanced at the letter. It named her neither hero nor villain, only necessity. A single line at the bottom, penned in his own hand. "She is the dawn that breaks the dragon's shadow." Lyanna tucked the parchment beneath her breastband, over the steady thump of her heart. They mounted, turned north along the river path where reeds bowed in the wind like kneeling courtiers. Behind them, King's Landing began to wake to the jagged reality of a realm without a king. Cries would rise soon, banners unfurl, swords sing. Ahead lay a road paved with both ice and fire, mended by wolf and dragon alike, or riven by them. Lyanna felt the weight of each hoofbeat carry her closer to that crossroads. She inhaled, tasting frost in the spring air, and urged her mare into a trot. Hours stretched. Trees blurred to green smears. The river shone like a blade beside them. Once, Rhaegar reached across the space between their horses to brush a lock of her hair that whipped loose in the wind. She met his gaze, sad, resolute, strangely gentle, and thought of all the kingdoms bound inside that single look. They rode on. In the distance, storm clouds gathered over the fields of the Reach, a dark crown upon the world. Lyanna Stark did not fear storm or crown. Her fear had vanished with the last breath of a mad king. All that remained was the path, and the promise that paths, like rivers, carve the land they pass through. She would carve hers in steel and courage, and the realm would remember that a wolf walked beneath dragon wings, carrying winter into the heart of summer until summer itself yielded. Night once more. A farmstead offered hay and thin broth. The farmer's wife watched them eat by the hearth and saw only weary travelers, their cloaks shabby, their manners quiet. She did not know that the king lay dead that morning by a stranger's hand. She did not know history slept in her hayloft. Lyanna woke near midnight to distant thunder. She slipped outside, drawn by the hush of falling rain. It pattered on thatch, on the wooden troughs, on her upturned palms. She tilted her head and let the sky rinse vengeance from her hair. The door creaked behind her. Rhaegar joined, cloak pulled close. "The storm breaks." "Yes," she said, voice hushed by rain. "Let it." They stood side by side, watching lightning stitch silver wounds across the clouds. Lyanna realized then that 5 hours could stretch or shrink by the measure of a single heartbeat. Time was malleable as steel fresh from the forge, and she had only begun to shape it. One day, in the dragon pit of King's Landing, wildfire casks lay hidden, forgotten by all save one dead man. But secrets seldom die with their keepers. Deep below, a faint tremor shook green glass tiers as they waited, patient and hungry, for someone to whisper the word, "Burn." North of the neck, ravens flapped from Aemon Blackfire's rookery, each bearing parchment sealed with wax so dark it seemed black even by moonlight. Men of the Night's Watch would read those words and tremble. The mad king slain, rebellion loose. Some would curse, some would cheer, some would wonder if winter cared for any of it. And in South in Sunspear, Prince Doran Martell read a coded message brought by a silent sister. He poured a second glass of strong wine, hands trembling despite his calm. "My dear Elia," he thought, "the storm you birthed has found its thunderhead." He closed his eyes, listening to the waves, imagining swords clashing far away. Gian? On the Trident, Eddard Stark urged his horse south, banners snapping like pale ghosts. He did not yet know the face of the assassin who felled the dragon. But he knew war smelled of smoke, and his sister's laughter echoed in every drop of rain that struck his helm. Permanently, and in the heart of the realm, riding north beneath a storm-torn sky, Lyanna Stark pressed onward. Each hoofbeat carried the taste of snow into lands that had forgotten winter's bite. She rode with steel at her hip and dragonfire beside her, unsure whether she was leading a prince to redemption, or he leading her to ruin. Yet she knew this. A song had ended with the last gurgle of a madman's throat, and a new song, one without harp or crown, had begun. It would be sung in roadsides and grand halls alike, in whispers and in roars, and its first verse had been written in a chamber bathed in torchlight and blood. As the storm rumbled over the river valley, Lyanna raised her hood, smiled a wolf smile into the wind, and let the dawn find her already moving. Yante. Rain thrummed upon the thatched roof until each droplet seemed an arrow dressing the night in subtle steel. Lyanna Stark lay cloaked in shadow beside the dying hearth of the farmstead, her shoulder pressed to the cool earthen wall. The old woman's broth had settled warm in her stomach, yet sleep refused her. Beyond the shutter, lightning stitched brief jagged tapestries across the fields, revealing an ocean of slick black mud and the bent silhouettes of winter-stripped willows. Every flash etched the world in the stark white she associated with fresh fallen snow. But the snow never came. Only the endless warm rain that smelled of churned soil and crushed grass, alien to a daughter of the north. Rhaegar breathed evenly a few paces away, his bedroll set with courtly precision, his silver hair dulled by soot and lamplight. He seemed unreal now, a myth half disguised in road grime. Yet there he lay, boots still on, dagger within reach, prince changed to exile by a single unheralded death. Lyanna watched his chest rise and fall, and wondered whether a heart so gilded could bear the weight of the realm she had thrust upon it. King's blood was supposed to ignite like wildfire when provoked, but he slept as though the storm's mutter were a lullaby meant for him alone. She rose silently, stepping over the snoring farm dog and nudging the door ajar. Cool damp air brushed her cheeks. Rain pattered against her brow like blessing and admonition both. She eased onto the veranda. Out there, the memory of the Mad King's blood still clung to her sleeves. Faint now, but impossible to forget. She had scrubbed her hands in river water until the skin chafed raw. Yet she still sensed slick warmth between her fingers, smelled copper in every gust. The world itself had not yet learned what she had done. But the wind knew, the river knew. Tomorrow, ravens would know, and soon the grass beneath 1,000 boots would know as well. She closed her eyes and breathed until the drum of her pulse slowed to a measured roll. Somewhere north of here, Eddard marched beneath gray banners. Somewhere east, Tywin Lannister sharpened patience into strategy. Somewhere far across the sea, a small girl with silver hair might feel a sudden shiver and never learn why. A soft tread behind her. She did not turn. Rhaegar's presence was announced first by the scent of rain upon wool, then by the muted creak of a loose plank. He halted an arm's length away, respectful even in exile. "You rest as poorly as I," he said. "I do not rest at all," she answered. "The thunder kept you awake?" "No. Memory." He exhaled as if the answer hurt. "There is no nature of sleep that mends memory. Only time. Time is every bit as cruel as kings," she said, brushing wet strands from her eyes. "It will grind us both to bone if we grant it license. We have taken license from it already. We forced years of reckoning into the space of a heartbeat." That word, heartbeat, called the scene back in savage clarity. The king's gurgling gasp, the sudden weight dragging her down, the hiss of blood in the brazier. She dared not answer. Instead, she lifted her gaze to the rolling dark. "Dawn will come," she murmured. "Dawn always does," Rhaegar replied, "though it arrives late sometimes, and sometimes draped in ash rather than gold." She shook her head. "Ash is for pyres and deserts. I was born to ice." A hush settled. Rain dwindled to a mist, a gentler rattle upon the eaves. Rhaegar moved to stand beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. At length he said, "If war swallows the realm, I will have forged nothing but sorrow. My father's sickness, my hesitation, your courage, each a spark, dropped in tinder. And Robert? Robert will swing his hammer at any shape that resembles a dragon, she interrupted. Even if the dragon is you. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. Robert Baratheon never needed a reason to swing his hammer. Lyanna's throat tightened with a pang of something too tangled for regret. When he hears I am alive and riding with a prince, he may call me kidnapper again. Or call me traitor. The prince studied her profile. Would that trouble you? To be called traitor? Ben Never. I have been called wild, willful, half a man, she said, meeting his eyes. Traitor is softer on the tongue. Her gaze slid to the muddy yard where their horses dozed beneath a slanted lean-to. But it may trouble those who follow my banner. Wolves rely on pack. A lone wolf starves. He nodded once, crisp, as though sealing decision. Then we must give the pack cause to gather. Letters will not suffice. We must deliver ourselves to them, your brother Jon Arryn Hoster Tully, face to face. And Robert? Robert values deeds above words, Rhaegar said. He must see with his own eyes that the realm has room for both wolf and dragon. He paused. And that Lyanna Stark's heart is hers to give, not his to claim. The air between them quivered, charged with all the questions they had avoided. Lightning flickered. Their shadows merged for a heartbeat, then parted. Lyanna felt her pulse steady, neither racing nor stilled, merely sure. We ride at dawn, she said. One. The crossroads inn loomed 2 days' ride hence, sagging under gray skyscape, but alive with rumor. Wagons yammed the yard, harnessed horses stamping in wet straw, while drivers swapped stories of sudden levies, restless lords, and a king slain by his own guard. One farmer declared he'd heard it from a cousin working the Red Keep kitchens, that Jaime Lannister slit the royal throat after a quarrel over a woman. Another insisted assassins from Braavos knifed the king on the privy. Everyone agreed wildfire would soon swallow half the city. Lyanna sat deep in her hood at a corner table, nursing watered ale and listening. Rhaegar, hooded as a sellsword, watched the door. Their 2 sworn blades, Sir Miles Mouton and young Jonathan Darry, stood near the hearth, pretending disinterest while mapping threats. The innkeeper's wife drifted by to refill mugs, her glance snagging on Rhaegar's posture. Even hidden, a prince's spine betrayed him. Lyanna shot her a crooked grin, a trick she'd learned to disarm stable boys. The woman moved on, flustered. A peddler slammed a fist on the trestle nearby. I'll wager the hands behind it, he declared. Jon Arryn's always hated dragons. Why else scramble the veil banners? Bah, scoffed a sellsword. Arryn's too pious to murder. No, this reeks of Tywin's rot. Lannisters shat this plot into daylight. He wouldn't kill the king and leave the throne empty, the farmer argued. Gold lions want gold crowns. Lyanna leaned back, letting their quarrel blur while her mind traced the ripple of lies across the riverlands. Every rumor was a thread. Sooner or later, threads knotted. She calculated which knot would strangle first. Rhaegar murmured. The longer tales swirl, the more each lord will choose the one that profits him. And if we present them truth is a rickety ladder. They will climb it only if the lies beneath burn. A sharp clatter at the door snapped every gaze. The latch banged open. 2 riders in drenched leather stomping mud across the rushes. Their badges bore a crimson trout leaping. Tully men. One peeled off his gloves, calling for mulled wine, then strode to the roaring hearth where Mouton and Darry braced. They exchanged curt nods, a quiet signal that no blades were drawn. Lyanna rose, pulling her hood low. She drifted near as the rider dug in his satchel and distributed sealed messages. She glimpsed wax-spattered blue and gray and green, Stark and Arryn colors. So Hoster Tully cast his net wide indeed. When the rider turned, catching her stare, she said, soft but firm, "Does Lord Hoster still keep counsel at River Run?" Suspicion shadowed his brow. "And who asks? Tell him the wolf he sheltered once seeks his hearth again." The man frowned, about to retort. But Rhaegar intervened, silver coin flicking into the rider's palm. "We will ride soon," the prince said. "Let the Lord know we come in peace." He did not wait for response, guiding Lyanna back to their table. She noted the rider's gaze linger on Rhaegar's gloves, worn but unmistakably of Dornish make, and on the faint shape of a harp case under the prince's cloak. Talk would bloom before dawn. While wolves and dragons slipped through rain-drenched crossroads, King's Landing writhed like a nest of snakes lit by sudden torch. The Iron Throne sat vacant. Its barbs glistened in lamplight, while Grand Maester Pycelle shambled through the hall, muttering prayers to every god he recalled. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower had sealed the castle gates the hour Aerys died, stationing white cloaks at every stair. Yet rumors seeped through stone as easily as the night's chill. Jaime Lannister knelt alone beside the corpse, hem of his cloak steeped in clotted black. He had arrived minutes after the deed, summoned by screams to find the mad king sprawled on the carpet, throat yawning crimson. The brazier hissed as fat spat into coals. Jaime's sword remained sheathed, yet already he saw accusation in every reflection. He covered the corpse with a torn tapestry, Aegon's conquest rendered suddenly obscene, then bowed his golden head. He had dreamed often of killing Aerys himself, but life's cruel jest had stolen even that release. Footsteps clanged in the corridor. The door burst wide and Sir Barristan Selmy strode in, white cloak flaring. His eyes widened at the tapestry-shrouded body. Jaime rose slowly. "What have you done?" Selmy's voice cracked. "Nothing," Jaime replied, realizing how weak truth sounded when wrapped in blood. "I came too late." Barristan advanced, gauntlet brushing hilt. "Swear it on your honor." "I do." Jaime's jaw tightened. "I swear on the honor of my house." Behind Selmy, Lord Varys materialized, in velvets like dusk incarnate. "Gentle sirs, we must lock away the scene. Fear and tongues are already loose in the streets." Barristan cut him a glare. "We will not cloak treachery in silk, Spider. But we may yet cloak the realm in peace," Varys cooed, fingertips steepled. "For who holds the city and the babe prince if the Kingsguard quarrel? Our enemies sharpen knives for Dragonstone even now." Jaime heard only fragments after that, blood roaring in his ears. He kept seeing towers burning, wildfire caches crackling beneath the Red Keep. Visions Aerys had taunted him with during fevered rants. He stared at his gloved hands, certain he smelled smoke already. Later, in the dim of the White Sword Tower, Jaime sat while Hightower questioned him. Words stuck. Every answer sounded rehearsed. When dawn paled the window, the Lord Commander's expression settled into hard disappointment rather than outright condemnation. Perhaps worse for a night raised on songs of glory. Hightower's final order came soft. "Guard the queen and her children until rightful heir assumes the throne. That is your pledge." Jaime bowed, though his heart muttered oaths far heavier. "Renurao?" By the time crows rose from Riverrun's Godswood, Lord Hoster had read 3 scrolls naming a Lannister culprit, 1 naming a faceless assassin, and 1, a raven fresh from the Crossroads Inn, claiming Lyanna Stark rode with Rhaegar Targaryen under neutral banner. The Lord's joints throbbed, age tugged his shoulders earthward, yet his mind wheeled with youthful dread. He ordered the drawbridge lowered at once. 2 days later, just after dawn, the drawbridge creaked for a party of 4 riders cloaked in road dust. The guard's eyes widened as silver hair flashed beneath one hood, and dark wolf locks beneath another. Sir Brynden Tully, lean as a bow and thrice as taut, strode forward to greet them in the outer yard. "You bring odd company, niece to be," the Blackfish said. Voice gravel smooth. "Lions chase rumors that you're seized. Yet here you sit the captor, it seems." Lyanna dismounted lightly, patting sweat from her mare's neck. "No captors, no captives, uncle. Only allies, if Riverrun opens its hearth to us." Bryndon's gaze flicked to Rhaegar. "The Riverlands bleed easy. Some here still curse dragons from when Harrenhal glowed red." "Den?" Rhaegar drew back his hood, rain-slick hair clinging. He bowed. "I come not to claim nor conquer, sir, only to prevent more bleeding." Bryndon's weathered face twitched at the prince's courteous tone. Unused to such from Targaryens, he signaled. "Stable hands. Then we best talk before the bleed becomes a flood. My lord brother waits inside." "One, Hoster Tully sat by a brazier in the council chamber, blankets over knees, gray eyes bright behind pain. Kat and Lysa stood at his shoulders, Kat's gaze fixed on Lyanna with a mix of relief and wary curiosity. Lyanna felt a pang remembering how they danced once at Harrenhal, laughing like girls promised a summer without end. Summer ended that night. Rhaegar stepped forward. No crown, no harp, only earnest bearing. "My lord," he began, "by the oaths sworn before gods and men, I pledge this. No son of mine shall sit a throne bought in wildfire and grief. Help me still the storm before it guts the countryside." Hoster raised a brow. "Your words swim smoother than most fish, Prince. But rivers run fastest when snow melts. The north is marching already." Lyanna spoke. "My brother marches to avenge our father and Brandon. That vengeance is complete. Aerys breathes no more." Lysa gasped. Kat touched her lips. Hoster stared, studying Lyanna's eyes as though seeking flicker of deceit. "How came the dragon to fall?" he asked. Silence pooled. Lyanna held the Lord's gaze. "By my hand." Shock warped the air. Kat's hand slipped from her mouth. Brynden barked a laugh more admiration than mirth. Hoster closed his eyes, whispering, "God save us." "A girl unmade the conqueror's line." "No, a madman's line," Lyanna corrected. Rhaegar interceded gently. "My father's crimes were mine to answer for." Yet Lady Lyanna answered swifter and truer than any counsel I mustered. "And now every realm looks to sharpen spears," Brynden said, stepping into the light. "They will not abide a Targaryen restoration, mad or no. Too many graves already." "Then let them weigh the cost of more graves," Rhaegar replied. "I would see council convened, lords great and small, to draft a compact of peace. Crown or council, regency or republic. I care not which device guides us so long as it spares the small folk." "Nain Hial." Hoster's fingers worried a wool edge. Words worth their weight in gold, yet gold buys precious little steel. He focused on Lyanna. "My lady, you rode south half a year past without permission. You return wielding the realm's fate like a dagger. Why should the Riverlands entrust its sons to such tide?" She stepped forward, every inch the wolf they whispered of. "Because I saw the realm's throat ready for the knife." Her voice softened. "Because I slew the butcher, and I will bleed beside any bannerman who dares keep his people safe after dawn." "They..." A moment stretched. Rain hammered stained glass. Then Hoster rose, slow but certain, and extended a hand toward Rhaegar. "I will host your peace council, Prince. But if one field of my lands burns, my rivers will feed armies until justice drinks its fill." Rhaegar clasped the offered hand. "So sworn." Rain. North of the neck, Ned Stark crossed wet moor beneath low clouds, 1,000 men marching behind, Manderless, Karstarks, Glover spearmen. A raven found him at mid-morning, bearing news of a council at River Run and whispered truths of Lyanna alive. Ned's horse shied as he read. He steadied it absently, eyes locked on parchment. The message bore Tully seals. Its scribe wrote of assassins unknown, of Rhaegar's offer of ceasefire. Robert demanded to see. Ned rode to the stag banner at Column's head, handing over the scroll. Robert's face flushed purple. Rain slicked his beard into spikes. Tully tongues wag with dragon lies, he snarled. "They shelter the snake who stole my betrothed." "She lives, Robert," Ned said, throat tight. "And she claims no captivity. She claims she went of her own will." Dot. Robert tore the parchment down the crease. "Madness. The girl is bewitched. You've seen his harp trick." Ned swallowed. "Mad or bewitched, I must see her with my own eyes. I ride to River Run." Robert's hammer swung down to rest across the saddle pommel. "Ride then. But if dragons spin your wolf ears, know this. I will avenge you both." The fury in his eyes was almost tenderness twisted. The next dawn, Ned spurred southward with a slim escort, heart pounding a rhythm older than duty. Behind him, Robert's host angled for the Blackwater, intent on seizing King's Landing before Tywin could lock it. News traveled faster than armies. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister read, coded note after note, each worse than prior. Aerys dead. Jaime suspect. Rhaegar missing, presumed traitor or captive. The old lion folded steepled fingers, gold catching candlelight. He dispatched ravens. One to his son in the city commanding silence. One to Stannis Baratheon at Storm's End probing alliances. One to Walder Frey offering silver for bridge rights, should the Riverlands choose sides against him. Then he summoned 4,000 men to ride within the fortnight. Some claimed he smiled. The servants swore otherwise. Undo, Kebandahan. In the throne room, the queen wept silently as Septus prayed over her two small children. Pycelle muttered sedatives. Varys whispered lullabies none recognized. Jaime kept the door. Golden cloak wet from constant rain. Twice messengers begged audience. Twice he turned them aside. He had taken a new vow, one known only to himself. No blood spilled past these doors unless it passed his sword first. Yet each time the queen glanced his way, he sensed her fear and her blame. He wore that blame like unshucked mail, heavy, cold. Randishay. Back in Riverrun, the high hall filled, each hour birthing new banners. Lords Bracken and Blackwood snarled across tables. Lord Raventree argued that a council without Robert Baratheon was folly. Lord Mooton countered that Robert sought only vengeance, not realm. Rhaegar listened, face unreadable, while Lyanna moved among the wives and daughters, coaxing soft voices to speak of roads unguarded, of granaries half empty, of children coughing from damp. The story she assembled was one of villages bracing for armies on 3 horizons, none certain what flag would swallow them. That night she joined Rhaegar on Riverrun's roofwalk. Torches guttered in the wind. The tumblestone below glimmered like a mailed serpent. She spoke first. Council's tongues wag but no deeds follow. They want someone else to leap first. Mepta show. Council's hearts seldom match council's mouths, he answered. We must show them a map beyond war. Something they can hold. She considered. If you abdicated, named a regent coalition, would Robert spare my son? His voice roughened. Perhaps not, but the realm might. His expression shifted helpless, then firm. I would abdicate crown but not children. They are my true realm. He hesitated. And you? She met his stare. I did not kill your father to wear a crown either. I asked the gods only for peace. She exhaled white fog. Yet if they demanded a crown in exchange for peace, I might not refuse. Silence again. Under torch glow, his eyes softened to dusk wine. He reached as if to tuck wind-blown hair behind her ear, then lowered his hand. A wolf queen, he murmured. Ice upon throne of knives. Perhaps the only metal that can quench it. Heat snared her cheeks. She bit back retort, uncertain if it would come sharp or tender. We have more urgent matters than poetry, she said, stepping away. He let her go, watching the rivers dance. Itamne. 3 days later, Ned Stark crossed Riverrun's drawbridge. Lyanna raced down the stair, hair streaming behind. They met in the yard, brother and sister clasping forearms, each breathing relief so fierce it bordered on pain. Ned studied her a long moment, at the marks of road on her cheeks, at the steady calm in her eyes. He whispered, "You look older." "I feel older." He drew her into an embrace despite the watching men. For an instant she let the weight of vengeance, of future, of dusk pools of dread, melt into the wool of his cloak. Then they parted. Ned's gaze moved past her to Rhaegar descending the steps. Words hung sharp in fogged air. Rhaegar bowed. Ned's hand drifted near sword hilt, then stopped. "Many graves lie between us, Prince," he said. "Too many," Rhaegar replied. "Help me seal them." They searched each other's faces, wolf mistrust against dragon regret, until Lyanna laid a hand on Ned's sleeve. "Hear him," she said. "Hear me." Hours later they met in Hoster's Solar. Ned, Rhaegar, Lyanna, Brynden, Catoi. Rain drummed as always. Rhaegar laid parchment maps, showing routes of Robert's host, columns of Tywin's levies, the food stores of the Reach, the sell-sale prices of Lys. He spoke not as heir but as strategist who saw that every army, if employed, would starve the land for years. Ned listened, stern but not unmoved. Eventually he said, "Robert will not be reasoned with so long as he believes he fights for Lyanna's honor." Lyanna answered, "Then he must hear it from my own lips." She lifted her chin. "Send ravens to Robert's camp. Tell him I am safe and ask for parley." Brynden sucked teeth. "Robert see a letter and call it dragon ink. He'll still march. Then I will ride to him," she said. Every voice objected at once except Rhaegar's. He watched her, solemn pride flickering. Ned slammed fist on table. "No. Too perilous. Nothing is more perilous than armies clashing," she countered. She placed her knife on the map, at the point marking the green fort. "Here. A neutral field. A peace tent. I will go, with no more than 2 guards. Rhaegar stays behind." Rhaegar tensed but said nothing. Ned shook his head slowly. "You trade one hostage for another." "I trade false war for true words," she replied. Hours of debate followed. Dawn found them bleary but resolved. Ned would escort Lyanna with 6 riders to Robert's host. Rhaegar would remain at River Run as pledge of good faith, his sworn swords in Brynden's keeping. Ravens flew forth, iron bodies slicing rain. Jaime, while the parley riders crossed sodden plains, wildfire drums beat low beneath King's Landing. Word of Tywin's march reached the small council. Panic nipped heels. Varys whispered that Sir Carlton Chelsted once oversaw wildfire stockpiles, but no one alive now held full record. Rumor said the Mad King's final dictum had hidden caches across the city for one last burning. In the gloom of dungeons, alchemists tested vials, green flame sputtering. Jaime walked corridors tasting phantom smoke, wondering whether the realm would burn not from war, but from a dead man's spite. Eventually Ned's column sighted Robert's camp. Canvas sea beyond a rise, banners whipping. Crowned stag, fox of Florent. The grim bear of Mormont. Horns sounded as the Stark group approached. Cloaks raised. Stormlanders formed wary cordon until sergeants recognized the direwolf, carried openly before Lyanna's palfrey dog. They escorted them to Robert's pavilion, blue and gold, and enormous. Inside Robert paced, great hammer leaning against table. When Lyanna entered, he froze. Sweat shone upon his brow despite the cold air. His blue eyes brimmed, thunderstruck between joy and betrayal. "Lyanna?" he breathed. She removed her hood. Robert tore it. He strode forward, seized her hands, squeezed too tight. "Thank the gods. I feared." He broke off, noticing Ned's guarded stance behind her. "Yet you ride with my friend, not my betrothed. What spell holds you?" "No spell," she said evenly. "I left Winterfell because I chose my own fate. I rode with Rhaegar because he treated me as a voice, not a trophy." "Maybe." Robert's grip slackened, color flew to his cheeks. "He kidnapped you." "He offered sanctuary when my father died," she said. "I accepted." Ned watched Robert's fury swell. He raised a calming hand. "Listen, Robert, tort." But Robert shook his head. "No? The dragon beguiled her. You drank his Dornish lies, Ned D." His gaze snapped back to Lyanna. "Name the abuse and I'll repay it in dragon blood." Lyanna's voice cracked like cold iron. "I killed Eris myself. No dragon holds my chains. Only my choices." Now. Silence stunned the pavilion. Robert's lips parted, disbelief warring with awe. He released her, stepping back as if scorched. "You? Gods. Then why not ride to me? Why shelter with him?" "Because he wants peace more than crown," she answered. "Because he mourns the realm's scars. Because, Robert, the realm cannot endure another conqueror's war." Robert retrieved his warhammer, hefting its weight. "The realm endured dragons 300 years. It can endure one more blow to crush them forever." Lyanna's throat tightened. "And the babes in the Red Keep? Viserys, infant Aegon? Will you crush them too?" "Nani?" Robert hesitated, only a heartbeat. "If need be," he said, voice leaden. Ned stepped forward. This is vengeance talking, not justice. Robert rounded on him. My father and brother are dead on Dragon Whim. Your own father and Brandon likewise. Yet you parley. Spittle flecked his beard. I will end their line. Then I will take Lyanna to wife and rebuild the realm new. Lyanna felt ice surge through limbs. I will not marry a man who slaughters children, she said quietly. Robert stared, hammer lowering. You loved me once. I loved the man who laughed under the heart tree, she replied, tears prickling. Not the one who weighs babes against grudges. He looked stricken, as though something precious slipped from his grasp onto stone. Face closing, he turned to Ned. Go back to your council of cowards. March with me or stand aside. When the city falls, we shall see whose peace prevails. He faced Lyanna one last time. I will still build a home for you if you come freely. She said nothing. Ned guided her out. Rain fell heavier, blurring banners into streaks of bleeding color. As they rode away, Lyanna did not glance back. She felt Robert's stare burn until distance and mist quenched it. Guaname. Their return to River Run felt longer, sodden miles stretched by silence. Ned pondered impossible branching futures. Lyanna watched storm clouds brood. Near dusk Yonathor Derry galloped ahead, cresting a ridge, then pivoted, shouting warning. A column of riders surged from treeline wearing crimson cloaks, stitched with gold. Lannisters, he cried. 9 riders against 30. Ned wheeled, shouted for retreat, but Lannister outriders spread wide, flanking. A horn brayed. Peace ravens flew slower than war horses. Steel rang in rain. Lyanna drew Brandon's dagger, but Ned spurred between, longsword raised. First clash broke shield rims. A Lannister spear grazed Lyanna's shoulder, ripping cloth. She stabbed the man's thigh, sent him screaming. Derry took a mace blow to helm, crumpled. Dismounted wolves fought back to back amid churned mud. It ended as swiftly as it began. 3 Lannisters lay bleeding, but they felled 2 of Ned's men and captured another. Their leader, a copper-haired knight with lion mane, gestured retreat before more Stark outriders rallied from rear. The crimson host vanished into trees, leaving Ned swearing over lifeless men. Lyanna pressed hand to bleeding shoulder. Ned bound it with strip of cloak. First blood of new war, he muttered, bitterness thick. She shook head. Not new. Same war, merely changing masks. They reached River Run, battered. Rhaegar met them in courtyard, relief shifting to horror at blood on Lyanna's tunic. She waved away healers. I am well. But Tywin's jaws close. Didn't I? In council, her news fell like scythe across wheat. Robert would not yield. Tywin's outriders ranged riverlands. Freys demanded coin for crossing. Peace flickered fragile as candle. Rhaegar paced. If Ziggy comes, small folk defirst. Ned slammed fist. We must fortify. Brynden agreed. Lords argued supply. Cat prayed at Septi. Lyanna withdrew to Godswood beneath weeping willows. Rain eased, leaving dripping hush. She knelt at Tully Hearttree, pale bark carved with countless scars less ancient than those at Winterfell. She pressed forehead to trunk. Old gods, new gods, listen, she whispered. Guide your wolf. Wind sighed through leaves. No answer but slow heartbeat of earth, yet she felt steadier rising. Rhaegar waited by the arch. Moon silvered his hair. Lamplight framed him in melancholy. She joined him. Each path leads to war, he said. Perhaps war is path, she answered. But not destination. He regarded her wound. I cannot watch you bleed again. His voice barely more than breath. She lifted chin. Do not watch then. Stand beside me. He raised her hand to his lips. In the quiet, his kiss was vow and apology. For an instant, she allowed herself the luxury of leaning into that warmth, of imagining hearths free from banners, children free from prophecy. Then horns blared distantly. Alarm from East Wall. They sprinted, a messenger breathless. Scouts sighted Tywin's vanguard torching villages along Red Fort. Riverlords scrambled. Garrison rushed to battlements. The night became flame-streaked urgency. Rhaegar summoned Mutundao. Ride to King's Landing under truce banner. Command the queen to surrender caches of wildfire. The city must not burn within or without. He pressed wax-sealed order. Use my name. Lyanna armed fully, binding shoulder tight. Ned sketched defense of outer hamlets. Brynden drilled bowmen along parapet lines, barking curses. Cat oversaw infirmary stocks. Midnight bells tolled as first refugees arrived. Mud-coated farmers clutching children, eyes wide with terror. Lyanna moved among them, offering bread, steady hands. A little girl stared at her sword belt. "Are you princess?" she whispered. Lyanna crouched. "Does it matter?" The girl shrugged small shoulders. "Princesses save people in stories." Lyanna smiled, though heart cracked. "Then yes," she said. "Tonight I am." Runnel. Tywin's host encamped a league away by dawn. Dust and torch smoke hung low. Horizon rimmed in lion banners. A raven arrived bearing gilded letter inviting Riverrun's lords to negotiate surrender before first blood. Hoster scoffed. Rhaegar penned response, offering parley on neutral ground at midday. Moments later, a second letter came from Tywin. If the prince delivered his own head, Tywin would spare the Riverlands. The council ended that exchange. Gihor. Within the Red Keep, Jaime read Rhaegar's message delivered by Mutton. The prince's seal commanded him to find and contain wildfire, to prepare city for peaceful entry of allied lords. Jaime felt weight shifting, new purpose after days of aimless dread. He grabbed torch, descended cellars with alchemists. What he found chilled him. Barrels stacked like cordwood, green seep at seams, unstable. If fire reached them, half the hill would shatter skyward. He ordered immediate drowning of fuses, seized tallies, mapped caches. Varys appeared from gloom, approval simmering. Saving city from ghosts of dragons. How poetic, the spider murmured. Jaime brushed past. No time for webs. Omosubao. Rhaegar watched Tywin's camp from battlement, face granite. Lyanna joined. "He will strike soon," she said. "Yes. Will we?" He shook head. "Not first. I will not add one more villain's name to lullabies. Then we ready to endure the villainy of others." A sudden grin split the prince's solemn mask. "You speak like snow, not Stark." She arched brow. He explained. "There is a saying in Dawn, never bait a sand snake unless you relish its bite." The grin faded. "I fear we have no choice but to bite." "That is still choice." They clasped forearms, their version of vow. Above them thunder growled, promising another sky-breaking storm. Way. Robert reached the Blackwater, seized Rowan barges, and prepared siege ladders. News of Tywin at River Run enraged him. Lion stole his glory. He spurred forward, vowing to reach the gates by week's end. Stannis, left to hold Storm's End, sent letters chiding rashness. Renly amused himself naming war horses. Seas churned with sell-sale rumors. The Seni princes offered fleets, Myers crossbows for coin. Braavosi captains weighed neutrality against profit. Across narrow sea, in Pentos, a magister named Illyrio heard whispers and began collecting dragon eggs no one believed real. Thus realm poised upon blade's edge, each hour adding weight until iron sang. One cloudless dusk, Riverrun sentries cried alarm. Riders galloping from north, flagged white direwolf and Aaron falcon. Robert's outriders? No. Jon Arryn himself, escort lean but swift. The Eyrie had emptied its airy halls. The hand of the king come to parley with traitors and loyalists alike. Rhaegar met him at gate, offering courtesy of hall and bath. Jon studied Prince's earnest eyes, Lyanna's proud stance, Ned's weary honor, and understood the realm's hinge pivoted here. That evening they gathered by hearth. Jon Arryn's voice carried decades of serving kings both bright and dark. He listened to Rhaegar's vision of counsel. He weighed Ned's plea. He watched Lyanna speak of small folk fates. He asked one question: who rules while council hammers laws? Rhaegar answered, a regent triumvirate, one representative of each great region. North, reach Stormlands, or any houses the council elects. Let them reign until Aegon or my daughter comes of age. Aaron stroked trimmed beard. Robert will never share table with dragon heirs, Lyanna said. Then invite his seed as well. Let thrones' heirs number more than dragons. She swallowed. If Robert marries another, his son could stand among them. Ned glanced sharply. Rhaegar, quiet. Aaron considered long. Peace demands sacrifice, he muttered. They talked past midnight. Outside, Tywin's fires flickered on horizon, as though listening too. The following dawn, ravens soared. To Highgarden, to Sunspear, to Pike, to the Eyrie again, to Storm's End. Each carried terms of great council to convene midsummer at Old Town, neutral ground blessed by fate. Maesters would witness, Septons bless. Whole realm invited to testify. Tywin answered with siege engines rolled to Riverbank. Yet he held bombardment. The great council, if it happened, might crown him regent. Better to loom than to strike. He drafted demands ensuring Lannisters hold purse strings. His scribe's quill smoked. Robert, upon reading Raven en route to King's Landing, roared with anger, flung it to river. But Sir Barristan, who had slipped from city with Jaime's tacit aid, found Robert's camp and delivered scroll naming wildfire threat, urging combined hosts to secure capital rather than sack. Barristan's honor carried weight. Robert cooled just enough to listen. At dusk Robert addressed his lords. We storm the gates in 2 days. No rape, no pillage, no torch to innocent homes. We douse wildfire first. Then we sit this council of old men, aye, but with my hammer on table. Cheers followed. Barristan bowed his head, accepting half victory. And then, inside Red Keep, Jaime guided Queen down torchlit tunnel to hidden postern that opened to river. Small boat waited, cloaked hull. Leave before Sieg, he urged, pressing ring of Lannister gold into her palm. Sail to Casterly Rock or Dragonstone. Keep the children safe. She stared at him, tears catching. And you? I must guard the city from ghosts, he said. Perhaps from myself. She kissed his cheek, whispering, Lion's honor. Then slipped into boat. Jaime watched lantern fade, turned back into castle's belly, sword drawn. And a shadow. Far beneath River Run in quiet room, Lyanna sat alone sharpening Brandon's dagger. Each rasp across whetstone matched her heartbeat. She thought of Robert marching, Jaime hunting wildfire, Tywin waiting, Dornish princes plotting in heat-hazed courts. She recalled the little girl who asked if princesses save people, and she whispered to Blade, "We will try." A knock. Rhaegar entered, cloak still damp. Tywin's envoys seek fresh talk at dawn. They hint of truce pending council's confirmation. She nodded, set dagger aside. We inch toward peace, built of threats. Peace seldom grows elsewise, he said softly. He knelt beside a small brazier, fed splinter of cedar. Flame bloomed yellow, gentle. Sometimes a seed needs just enough fire to crack open. She watched sparks dance, remembering a different brazier, spattered crimson. She laid hand over his. Then we guard the flame, not let it consume. He turned palm upward, interlaced fingers with hers. Silence deepened, broken only by distant thunder. A storm brewing far off, perhaps at Blackwater, perhaps in hearts. For a moment, they allowed warmth to anchor them, two souls adrift among armies. Outside, the river whispered around castle roots, telling stories older than kings. In its song, Lyanna heard promise. That even stones wear down, edges smooth beneath persistent current. She leaned her head against Rhaegar's shoulder, eyes drifting closed. For first time in many moons, she slept, not because there was no danger, but because danger could wait, just 1 hour, while dawn gingerly, deliberately, peeled back night. Until morning sun rose pale as parchment over fields, where lions and trout eyed one another between hedges. Tywin's envoys arrived at River Run Gate, white flags limp. Ned, Brynden, Jon Arryn awaited. Words were exchanged, curt, cautious. An accord. Tywin would withdraw 2 leagues while council delegates rode to Old Town. Riverlands would host no army save garrison. Terms to be signed before High Septon at noon. But wary eyes saw smoke on distant horizon. King's Landing under siege. War did not pause for quills. 4 days later, Robert's ladders kissed city walls. Jaime's men had drowned half the wildfire vats. Still, green fire bloomed along King's Gate when drunken goldcloaks panicked and dropped lantern. Screams rose, smoke thick. Robert's soldiers toiled with wet hides to smother. A breach opened near Lion Gate, where starving small folk pulled planks aside, begging bread. Robert ordered bread wains forward, unexpected mercy that won cheers. Within keep, Jaime fought rogue pyromancers. Steel clanged in narrow stair. At Septi Bell Tower he met his former squire slain by green flame. He cut down alchemist wielding torch, cursing him. When dawn broke, the worst had passed. Large swaths of city smoldered but stood. Robert's standards flew atop city gates by evening. Jaime surrendered, offering keys, demanding safe treatment for small folk. Robert accepted grudgingly. The next day, ravens streaked south carrying news. The city taken with minimal blood. Queen fled, wildfire contained. Robert crowned himself protector until council. He invited Rhaegar and lords to parley in Septate. War's fever cooled a degree in a one day. And so the Riverlands exhaled, though blades stayed close to hand. Rhaegar prepared to ride for King's Landing beneath Tyrell escort. Ned would accompany, Cat remaining to tend River Run. Lyanna donned fresh riding leathers, shoulder healed to dull ache. Before dawn departure, she walked battlements one last time, watching trout banners flutter restful in first gold. She felt weight of future settle like breastplate, heavy yet fitting. She whispered into the dawn, 5 hours, 5 lifetimes. She smiled wryly at memory of that wish, then turned as hoofbeats echoed in yard. Rhaegar awaited, silver hair gleaming. He offered his gloved hand, steady and open. Lyanna Stark took it, stepped into saddle, and together they rode out the gate where war once loomed, toward a realm balanced precariously between peace and sword edge. Wind tugged her cloak, carrying scent of wet earth and distant sea salt, mingling ice and fire across the bare island breeze. She did not know whether the song ahead would be lament or lullaby, but she intended to write every verse with blade tempered in mercy. As they crossed the drawbridge, river light flickered upon steel and stirred faint echoes of a throne abandoned, of a madman's last scream, of a hammer raised, of a dagger's decisive hush. Echoes answered by a hoofbeat promise, relentless, resolute, guiding wolf and dragon alike into a dawn still fragile, still forming, and endlessly, fiercely theirs. Huen, Kei, and Ken. The slow journey to King's Landing began under bruised clouds that threatened rain, but none fell. Instead, an uneasy stillness blanketed the land, as if the very air waited to see whether peace would hold, or some reckless act would set the realm afire once more. The host that rode south was no army, more a procession of wary ambassadors. At its heart rode Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, bracketed by Eddard Stark, Jon Arryn, Brynden Tully, and a handful of trusted knights and squires. Behind them came Tyrell banners, green and gold, flashing beside the gray of the wolf and the red trout of River Run. No songs greeted them at village crossings. Farmers paused at their fields, uncertain whether to cheer or flee. Mothers kept children indoors, wary of any gathering of banners, dragon, wolf, or stag. Small folk lived in the aftermath of war, as those who had survived wildfire or storm. Keen-eyed, careful, hoarding hope against the next calamity. At night, they camped in the lee of ruined hamlets or half-charred barns. Fires were kept low. Sentries doubled. Rumor sped faster than the hooves of messengers. News of the Mad King's death and Robert Baratheon's taking of the city was old already. Now the talk was of a council to decide the fate of the 7 kingdoms. A council called by a wolf and a dragon both. Lyanna slept poorly. Dreams haunted by 100 faces. Brandon's and her father's chief among them. She saw the Mad King's eyes glassy and accusing. She saw children wailing as wildfire lit up the night. Yet she also dreamed of rivers unspoiled by blood, of the heart tree at Winterfell, and of Rhaegar's gentle hands bandaging her wounded shoulder with the care of a healer, not a prince. In her waking hours she was all resolve, but the nights reminded her of every fragile thing left to lose. On the third day, a raven brought a letter from Cat at River Run. She reported that Tywin Lannister's host had withdrawn but remained at the edge of the Riverlands, watching. Walder Frey played both sides, charging passage for every rider, every wagon, every word that crossed his bridge. Refugees continued to arrive, and the larders were stretched thin. Cat ended with love for Ned, a blessing for Lyanna, and a warning. Do not trust the peace to last beyond the council. By the fifth day, King's Landing appeared on the horizon, its walls blackened in places by recent flames. Columns of smoke still drifted above the city, though the worst of the wildfires had been extinguished. Atop the gates, Robert's crowned stag banner hung beside the battered red of House Targaryen, a gesture of uneasy alliance. They entered through the Lion Gate, the city's defenders watchful but unsmiling. The streets stank of ashes, spoiled meat, and too many unburied dead. Lyanna and Ned rode in silence, eyes flicking from burned-out tenements to huddled beggars, to the battered faces of goldcloaks who watched their passage with a mix of suspicion and sullen resignation. At the Red Keep, they dismounted before the Tower of the Hand. Robert awaited them there, ringed by his closest lords. Renly and Stannis, Mace Tyrell, Lord Redwine, and a handful of Stormland and Crownland bannermen. Barristan Selmy stood beside him, unsmiling, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Beside Barristan stood Jaime Lannister, face pale, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. Robert's greeting was gruff, more a grunt than welcome, but he did not reach for his warhammer. Instead, he embraced Ned with a rough affection and nodded curtly at Lyanna. His gaze flicked to Rhaegar and lingered there, eyes hard. "You come late, dragon," Robert said, voice thick with warning. Rhaegar bowed his head. "I come as promised. To counsel, not conquest." Robert grunted. "We'll see what you mean soon enough." Jon Arryn stepped forward, his presence an anchor amid the dangerous tides. "The council assembles at noon, in the Great Hall. The High Septon will preside. Until then, lords and ladies, rest and refresh yourselves." Rooms had been prepared in Maegor's holdfast for the peace delegation. Lyanna found her chamber sparse but clean, with a single window looking down over the city. From here she saw the patterns of rebuilding already beginning. Men hauling stone, women sweeping debris, children darting through ruined alleys. A bell tolled somewhere, and she thought of the hundreds who must have died in the fires. She pressed her hand to the glass, feeling the warmth of the sun fight against the coldness that had settled in her chest since the day of the assassination. She changed into a gown of plain northern gray, her only concession a blue ribbon at her throat. She brushed out her hair, braided it in the fashion of Stark women, and prayed. First to the old gods, then to the new, then to any powers that might listen, that the day would end without blood. At noon, the lords and ladies of Westeros filled the great hall. The Iron Throne loomed above, its jagged blades gleaming in the dim light, but it sat empty. Before it, a great table had been set. The High Septon, old and bent, presided. On either side sat the principal claimants and peacemakers: Robert, Rhaegar, Jon Arryn, Ned, Mace Tyrell, Doran Martell's envoys, Balon Greyjoy's scowling brother, and others. Lyanna took her seat beside Ned. Rhaegar sat opposite, beside Barristan Selmy, who had replaced his white cloak with a black sash for mourning. The council began with recitations of the dead: Aerys, Brandon, Rickard, and so many thousands more. The High Septon prayed for forgiveness, for wisdom, and for the realm to be guided by justice and mercy. When the prayers ended, Jon Arryn spoke first, his voice calm and commanding. "We are gathered not to carve up a corpse, but to heal a wounded kingdom. The Mad King's death was neither glorious nor gentle. If we are to survive, we must put aside vengeance and reach for something greater than our own ambition." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Tywin Lannister, seated with his bannermen near the back, watched with hooded eyes. His son Jaime sat stiff and silent, gold and white, a blur amid the shadows. Robert spoke next, hammering the table with his fist. "Justice is what's needed, not pretty words. My father and brother died in fire because of dragons. If peace is to come, let it be built on solid ground. No more Targaryens ruling from that cursed throne." Rhaegar's voice, quiet but clear, followed. "My father's madness killed more than dragons. It nearly destroyed us all. I do not seek to rule by right of blood alone, nor by sword. Let the council decide who sits the throne. Let the lords and people speak, not war." There was a long silence. Then Mace Tyrell rose, voice oily. "The Reach will support peace, provided its rights are respected, and its fields not burned by southern ambition. We have no wish to see King's Landing sacked anew, nor to bow to fire or storm." One by one the other great lords spoke, Doran's envoy pressing for Dornish independence, Balon's brother pressing for ships and self-rule, the Vale for neutrality, the Riverlands for stability. At last, Jon Arryn proposed the compromise that had been debated at River Run. A great council of regents to rule in the name of the realm, with no king or queen until the next generation. Rhaegar's son Aegon, Robert's bastard Edric Storm, and any other claimants of royal blood would be raised as wards of the realm. Together, not apart. The regency would be chosen by council, answerable to the lords and the faith. Robert scowled. "No bastard of mine will sit beside a dragon whelp. I want my own house, my own legacy." Lyanna spoke then, her voice low but strong. "Peace cannot be built on grudges or ambition. I killed the Mad King for the realm, not for any house. If you want peace, let the children be raised together, so that when they are grown, the realm will have known something other than hatred." A hush settled. The High Septon nodded. "Let the council vote." It took hours. Lords whispered, threatened, bargained, withdrew, returned. At dusk, the High Septon announced the council's decision. The regency would be held by a council of 3. Jon Arryn, Eddard Stark, and Mace Tyrell, with the faith as witness. The heirs would be raised in the Red Keep, fostered equally by the regents, until their 16th year, when the realm would choose its ruler by vote of the lords and faith. Robert brooded, but did not refuse. Tywin Lannister offered no protest, but his eyes promised trouble ahead. Doran's envoys bowed, the Martells accepting for now. Only the Ironborn muttered threats, and even they fell silent at the promise of naval concessions. That night, a feast was held, more solemn than joyful. Bread was broken, toasts offered, but every smile was tinged with caution. Lyanna sat at the high table, a place she had never wanted, watching the play of candles upon steel and gold and jeweled goblets. Rhaegar sat beside her, his hand trembling only once when she touched his wrist. Ned smiled at her across the table, pride and worry mingling in his eyes. As the feast waned, Lyanna slipped from the hall. She found herself in the Godswood, beneath the red leaves of a transplanted weirwood. Its carved face faded by southern sun. She knelt and pressed her hand to the roots. She did not hear Rhaegar approach, but she felt his presence in the hush of the trees. He knelt beside her, silent. "I dreamed of this place as a child," Lyanna said, voice quiet. "I dreamed the gods watched, even here." He took her hand, holding it between his. "You are the bravest soul I have ever known." She shook her head. "I am only a girl who ran too far." Rhaegar smiled. "And yet, you stopped a war." She leaned against him, eyes closing for a moment. "Only for now. Tywin will not rest. Robert's pride is a sword pointed at the peace. The Ironborn will raid again. Even the faith may turn if the winds shift. We will hold the line together," Rhaegar promised. "For Aegon, for all the children to come. For the realm." They sat together in the dark, the stars above barely visible through the southern haze. For a moment, Lyanna allowed herself to believe in peace. In the weeks that followed, the city slowly returned to life. Gold cloaks patrolled the streets, lords returned to their seats, and food flowed once more through the gates. Refugees found work rebuilding walls and homes. Maesters cataloged the dead, the wounded, and the missing. Wildfire was carefully removed from the cellars, and the alchemists watched closely by the new regents. Lyanna moved through the city like a ghost, half welcomed, half feared. Small folk whispered that she had slain the Mad King herself, and songs began to spread. Most wrong, some garbled, one painting her as a she-wolf with eyes of ice and heart of steel. Children gathered in the streets, daring each other to approach her for a touch of her hand, as if she were blessed or cursed. She gave them her northern smile and wished them safer legends. Robert refused to stay at the Red Keep, instead taking up residence at the old Targaryen manse across the city, brooding with his brothers and stormlords. He drank heavily, hunted boar in the Kingswood, and trained daily with his hammer, as if waiting for peace to break. Ned worked tirelessly in council, negotiating between lords, soothing wounded pride, and quietly sending for Cat and the children. He missed the north with an ache that only Lyanna recognized in his eyes. Rhaegar played harp in the evenings, sometimes alone, sometimes for the children who would one day rule the realm. He spoke seldom in council, content to let others decide, but when pressed, he offered quiet wisdom. More than once, Lyanna caught him watching her with a gentle, searching gaze. Jaime Lannister was acquitted of the Mad King's murder after testimony from multiple witnesses, but he found no glory in survival. The Kingsguard, diminished and battered, kept vigil over the young heirs. Barristan Selmy became Lord Commander, his honor a beacon in the uncertain dusk. Letters came from Dorne, from the Vale, from the Reach, and even from the Iron Islands, each bartering, warning, or beseeching. The realm's wounds did not close quickly. River Run and Winterfell sent grain and wool to the city, while the Riverlords policed the roads. The Reach rebuilt the markets. The Dornish sent gold and skilled craftsmen, seeking favor and promises for the future. One evening, as summer's first heat pressed the city, Lyanna walked the ramparts with Rhaegar. They spoke of the future, of the children, of the chance for a council to become a true parliament, of returning the north to its ancient customs. Lyanna confided her longing for cold wind, for snow, for the wild heart of home. Rhaegar promised to ride north when the council allowed, to see the lands she loved, to learn the language of wolves and rivers. That night, as the city slept, a fire broke out in the Flea Bottom. Gold cloaks rushed to battle the flames, but in the confusion, assassins struck at the Red Keep, seeking the young heirs. They were foiled by Jaime and Barristan, but not without blood. A squire died, a Kingsguard was wounded, and for the first time since the council, the peace felt brittle as ice in spring. Lyanna stood over the fallen, her hands red once more. She realized then that peace was not an act or an event, but 1,000 choices, each paid for with vigilance and sacrifice. She saw fear in the eyes of those who looked to her for answers. The next morning she called the council to the Hall of Faces, a small chamber reserved for the regents and trusted knights. She spoke plainly. Peace is not words on parchment. It is the work of every day, every hour. I will not rule, nor will I hide. I ask you all to stand with me, not as lords and ladies, but as guardians of what we have bought with blood. Ned nodded, and Rhaegar took her hand. Mace Tyrell agreed, offering grain and coin. Jon Arryn placed a steady hand on her shoulder, voice quavering with hope. We will guard the dawn together, he promised. In the days that followed, Lyanna led the effort to rebuild the orphanages and houses burned in the war. She rode the streets with the Kingsguard, helped the wounded, listened to the tales of the small folk. She kept watch over the young heirs, teaching them to read and to ride, to speak both the language of dragons and of wolves. Robert visited less and less, his rage slowly giving way to exhaustion. One evening, as Lyanna returned from the city, she found him waiting in her chamber. He was drunk, but not angry. I loved you, he said, voice raw, but I cannot love what you have become. She touched his cheek gently. Nor can I love what you have become, Robert. Let us part as friends if we cannot be more. He wept, head bowed, then left her in the quiet dark. She watched him go, heart heavy but unbroken. Rhaegar found her there, and they sat together through the night, saying nothing, sharing the burden of memory and hope. The next moon the great council convened once more, this time in Old Town beneath the watchful eyes of the Faith and the Maesters. The regency was confirmed, the terms set. The heirs, Aegon, Edric, and the Martell child, were fostered together, and 100 lords swore new oaths. Lyanna returned to Winterfell with Ned and Rhaegar, leaving the city to heal. She rode beneath the old boughs, breathed the sharp air, felt the earth strong beneath her feet. Rhaegar learned to ride through snow, to hunt, to dance at the harvest feast. He played harp by the heart tree, and Lyanna sang songs in the old tongue, her voice carrying across the frosted fields. As the years passed, the realm knew seasons of peace and moments of peril. Assassins came and failed. Plots bloomed and withered. Children grew, Aegon wise and brave, Edric strong and fair, the Martell girl fierce and clever. The council grew in strength, the lords in wisdom, the people in hope. When the day came for the realm to choose its ruler, the hall was filled with banners of every house, north and south, east and west. Lyanna stood beside Rhaegar, watching as the lords voted, each voice a pebble in the stream of history. In the end, the realm chose not a king, but a council. 3 to rule, with the heirs as wards to be chosen only if war threatened again. The Iron Throne was left empty, a relic of old wounds, its blades dulled by time and memory. Lyanna Stark lived to see the north at peace, the snows fall upon fields undisturbed by war tide. She watched the children grow, saw Aegon led knights to hunt, but returned to study with the Maesters, saw Edric race horses across the moors, saw the Martell girl dance with wolves beneath the moon. And she knew, as she watched the sun rise over Winterfell one quiet dawn, that the wound she had opened in the Mad King's throat had not been a curse, but a sacrifice. That peace, though fragile and incomplete, was a prize worth every drop of blood. That history, in the end, remembered not crowns, nor banners, nor swords, but the courage of those who dared choose mercy. And so, in the quiet after the storm, with winter's chill at her back and the warmth of Rhaegar's hand in hers, Lyanna Stark smiled and let the dawn come. Ga, Joshsiwara. The wind howled against the walls of Winterfell, a song older than memory, as the seasons cycled slowly into the realm's first true peace in a generation. The godswood had thickened with snow, the heart tree's red eyes gazing unblinking as Lyanna Stark crossed the crunchy white, her boots leaving marks alongside the light imprints of wolves. Overhead, the sky was a cold, colorless void. In the quiet before the castle stirred for another day, Lyanna stood before the carved face, her breath feathering in the air. She pressed her palm to the rough bark, recalling a life spent seeking answers in places both sacred and profane. A queen in all but name, mother to a realm's uncertain future. She found no visions, only the steady, pulsing heartbeat of home. The hush reminded her that after every storm, the North endured, and that sometimes endurance was the truest form of victory. Behind her, small feet crunched through the snow. A boy's laugh, wild and bright as winter sunlight, echoed through the trees. Aegon, her fosterling, Rhaegar's son, hair a dark silver with a streak of ash blonde, dashed between the roots, swordstick in hand, his cheeks flushed. "Mother," he called, using the word easily, though she had never borne him. "Come see. Ghost and Lady have found a burrow, maybe rabbits." A Shire girl followed, Martell by blood and Summer by temperament, her sable hair bound with yellow ribbon. "Don't run so fast," she called, and Lyanna smiled, beckoning them both. "I'll join you in a moment," she promised, watching the pair dart away. Their voices mingled with the low growls and playful barks of the wolves. Ned found her as the sky turned palest blue, his own fur cloak thick over graying mail. Lines etched his face more deeply, but his eyes, as always, were earnest, searching. He looked at her. His sister, his queen in all but name, the breaker of a cycle of violence that had threatened to devour them all. "They're growing fast," he said, voice gentle. "All children do," Lyanna answered. faster than the realm can change. Change is always slow, and always comes too late for some, Ned said, glancing at the children. But we do what we can with what we have. Father would have said so. Lyanna's smile was wry but fond. Father would have told us to keep swords sharp and never trust peace that comes too easily. They stood in companionable silence, each lost to the enormity of what the years had cost. At length, Ned spoke again. You know Robert sends word. He wishes to visit before the next council at White Harbor. I expected as much. I'm not sure what peace he seeks here, perhaps only with himself. Lyanna's eyes followed the children and the wolves as they disappeared beyond the trees. He will find Winterfell as it has always been, Ned replied. But the North remembers everything. He cannot come as king. Lyanna nodded. He will come as my old friend if he is wise. And if he is not, he will find the wolves waiting. Robert Baratheon arrived at Winterfell, not in the finery of a king, but wrapped in a heavy traveling cloak, a modest escort trailing behind. His hair had gone gray at the temples. His beard was shaggy and threaded with white, but his stride was broad and sure as ever. He laughed boisterously when he saw Ned in the yard, and clapped his old friend on the shoulder with such force that Ned winced. He gripped Lyanna's hands in his own, large and warm, his gaze drinking her in as if uncertain she was real. You haven't aged a day, he said, which was, of course, a lie. Her eyes were older, her hands steadier, her beauty no longer that of a maiden, but of a woman who had walked through fire and frost. Welcome to Winterfell, Robert, she said. You'll find the ale colder than the council's wine, and the hearths hotter than any in the south. His smile softened. And the company finer than any king deserves. I come as your friend, Lyanna. No more, no less. Ned ushered them inside, where Cat waited with Sansa and Arya. The girls dressed in thick woolens, their hair braided. Arya's eyes were bright with questions. Sansa curtsied with practiced grace. Robert looked between them, memory shadowing his face. They have your look, Cat, and the Stark in them too, he said, ruffling Arya's hair. The evening passed in stories and laughter, as if the wounds of war could be soothed by bread, meat, and memory. Lyanna played host, ensuring Robert was never without a mug, and Cat watched, wary but kind, never letting her children stray far from her side. Later, as the fire burned low and the company thinned, Robert lingered beside Lyanna on the high seat of the great hall. He studied her, as if the candlelight could reveal all that years and crowns had hidden. I dreamed of this once, he confessed, voice thick with nostalgia. Of sitting with you here, sons and daughters at our feet, ruling together. I wanted that more than any throne. Lyanna met his gaze, honest and unwavering. It was never ours to have, Robert. We were children in a world shaped by the desires of old men. I do not regret the peace that came from our choices, even the hard ones. He nodded, staring into the fire. I tried to hold the realm together, Lyanna. Tried and failed. Even now, the lords circle, hungry for their share. You did not fail, she told him. No king can heal wounds alone. You held the line. That is all any of us can do. Aim, he grinned, some of his old spark returning. Still, I'd rather have been your husband than your king. She laughed softly, squeezing his hand. And I'd rather you remember me as I was, wild and laughing, not tired by rule. He left the next morning, departing before the dawn. Lyanna watched from the battlements as his party vanished into the snow, wondering if she would ever see him again, and hoping for both their sakes that this farewell would be gentler than their first. The years spun on. The great council at White Harbor met amid storms, drawing banners from every corner of the realm. The lords arrived by ship and horse, some eager, some sullen, many uncertain whether the experiment of shared regency could last. Lyanna arrived with Rhaegar, Ned, and a retinue of Northmen. She wore her house colors, her cloak trimmed in white wolf fur, her hair braided with a single silver strand. At her side walked Aegon and Martell girl, Elia, named for the mother lost in the flames of King's Landing. Edric Storm rode with Robert, taller now, his Baratheon strength visible even at 14. The council met in the great hall, the air thick with competing scents, salt and snow, incense and wet wool. The faith's highest septon presided, as was now tradition. The maester stood ready, tallying votes, recording every word. Merchants and small folk crowded the balconies, proof that the council, for all its failings, had given the people a voice. Disputes flared, over borders, over trade, over the raising of the young heirs. Doran Martell's envoys pressed for more independence. The Lannisters demanded grain shipments to replace those lost in the war's final fires. Euron Greyjoy, newly returned to the Iron Islands, sent a raven threatening raids unless the Ironborn were granted new lands. Through it all, Lyanna listened and spoke only when the room seemed ready to splinter. When the council debated the succession, voices rose and tempers frayed. Mace Tyrell and his sons pressed Aegon's claim. Robert, grim-faced, argued for Edric. The Northern Lords, led by Ned, called for the council to continue, not be ended by the crowning of a new king or queen. Lyanna stood at last, the hall falling to hush. The realm is not ready for crowns, not while wounds remain unhealed. Let the heirs grow together, learn together, and prove to the realm that old hatred can be put aside. Let them hunt and train in the north, learn the law in the Reach, sail with the Ironborn, study with the maesters. When they are grown, let the realm choose. Not by blood, but by wisdom and merit. Duh? It was a compromise, and like all compromises, pleased no one entirely. But the lords, seeing no better way, consented. Rhaegar spoke quietly beside her. You have given them what no king could. Time. She squeezed his hand beneath the table. Time for hope, if nothing more. At Winterfell, seasons turned. Arya became a swift rider, besting her brothers in archery and swordplay. Sansa grew tall and graceful, learning the arts of rule and poetry from her mother and from Cat's old friend, Brienne of Tarth, who visited with tales of knighthood and honor. Aegon and Aelia learned the North's harsh lessons. How to hunt in deep snow, how to listen for the creak of ice, how to endure silence and darkness. They thrived. The North changed too. The old ways were honored. Feasts under the heart tree, songs sung in the old tongue. But new voices joined the chorus. Dornish from Elia, Baratheon from Edric, who visited each year. The small folk grew accustomed to seeing children with hair the color of moonlit steel playing beside those with black or auburn locks. Maesters recorded the change with careful, neutral hands, noting every small shift, every truce, every new wedding. Rhaegar and Lyanna walked the woods together in the evenings, sharing stories of the past and plans for the future. They spoke of establishing new schools, of rebuilding the ruined towns of the Riverlands, of sending grain south in winter. Rhaegar taught music to the children, while Lyanna led them on hunts and taught them the ways of the wild. One autumn, as leaves turned to fire and gold, word reached Winterfell that Tywin Lannister had died. Peacefully in his sleep, some said. Poisoned by a vengeful servant, others whispered. Jaime succeeded him as Lord of Casterly Rock, leaving the Kingsguard to marry and begin anew. The Lannisters sent envoys north, seeking alliances. Lyanna entertained them with courtesy but kept her distance. The North, she knew, would always watch lions with wary eyes. In the south, Doran Martell grew frail, his letters less frequent. Elia visited Sunspear for a season, returning with tales of water gardens and desert roses. She spoke with a new pride of her heritage, and Lyanna encouraged it, believing every child deserved to know all sides of their story. In King's Landing, the regency continued, sometimes smooth, sometimes marred by intrigue. Ned spent half his years in the capital, half in the north, never ceasing to miss Cat or their children. Rhaegar visited to lend his wisdom, but preferred the north's honest cold to the city's sly warmth. One night, as Lyanna watched snow fall beyond her window, a raven arrived from the wall. Jon Snow, Ned's son by his quiet wife, had joined the night's watch. The letter was brief, dutiful, full of the strength and sadness Lyanna recognized from her brother. "He will make a fine man," Rhaegar said, reading over her shoulder. "The wall needs men of honor." Lyanna set the letter aside. "He will endure, as we have. The North gives more than it takes." Not all was peace. Twice, raiders from the Iron Islands struck the coast, burning villages before disappearing into the fog. Twice, the North's lords retaliated, sending longships in pursuit. Lyanna rode to the coast herself, standing atop cliffs with Aegon and Elia, watching the sea for sails. She taught them to read the waves, to see threats before they arrived. And in the capital, a plot was uncovered. A handful of gold cloaks, bribed by exiled lords, seeking to seize the heirs for ransom. The attempt was foiled by Arya, who discovered the plot while exploring the dungeons. She was knighted by the council for her courage, the first female knight named in the North since before the conquest. As Arya knelt for the sword's tap on her shoulder, Lyanna watched, pride swelling in her chest. "You are a Stark," she told her niece. "Never let the world forget it." Arya grinned, wolfish and unbowed. "I'll make them remember, Aunt." Years passed. Edric Storm returned to the Stormlands, grown strong and stubborn. He inherited Storm's End, bringing with him lessons learned from the North and the Council. Aegon and Elia came of age together, wise beyond their years, beloved by the small folk for their courage and fairness. They traveled the realm, learning from maesters and merchants, soldiers and smiths. When Jon Arryn died, the council named a new regent, a woman from the Riverlands, chosen for her wisdom and the respect she commanded among the lords. The faith blessed the transition, and the small folk celebrated in the streets. One evening, as Lyanna and Rhaegar walked beneath the stars, he paused and turned to her, moonlight painting his hair silver. "We have given them a chance," he said softly. "Nothing more, nothing less." Lyanna smiled, leaning into him. "It is enough. I would rather live in a realm where peace is possible than rule over a kingdom built on ash." Then day. He wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of the past slip away. A generation later, as the heirs gathered in the great hall at Winterfell, the council assembled one final time to vote. Banners of every house hung from the rafters. The people filled the courtyard, eager and hopeful. Aegon stood at the center, Elia and Edric at his side. Arya, now a woman grown, led the proceedings, her voice strong and sure. The vote was close. Every house weighed the lessons of the past, the hopes of the future. In the end, Aegon was chosen, not as king, but as first regent, to rule with a council, his decisions balanced by the wisdom of the lords, the voice of the faith, and the will of the people. Lyanna watched from the high seat, her hair now streaked with silver, her eyes bright with pride. Rhaegar stood beside her, older, his beauty deepened by laughter and sorrow alike. As Aegon knelt for the blessing of the faith and the acclaim of the realm, Lyanna whispered a prayer to the old gods and the new. "Let this peace last. Let the children of dragons and wolves remember not only war, but the hope born in fire and blood." She rose, and the hall erupted in cheers. The North, the South, the East, and the West, all joined in a single song of unity, a song Lyanna had never dared dream to hear. And so ended the long shadow of the Mad King, not with another war, but with a woman's courage, a brother's wisdom, and a realm that learned at last to choose mercy. Lyanna Stark, breaker of cycles, watched as the sun set over Winterfell, knowing that peace, though never perfect nor permanent, was a victory worth every scar. And as the children laughed in the yard, wolves and men running together in the gathering dusk, Lyanna smiled, at last content, beneath the ageless heart tree of the North. K. and Kanchan. The late autumn sun hung low over Winterfell, painting the battlements gold and scarlet as the realm prepared for yet another turning of the seasons. The sound of axes rang through the godswood as woodsmen felled dead trees for the coming winter's fires. In the bailey, children raced between armsmen and horses, their laughter bright above the deep clangor of the smith's hammer. Old Maester Luwin stood with a parchment roll at the solar window, reading the latest missive from King's Landing aloud for Lyanna and Rhaegar as they sat with Eddard and Catelyn by the warmth of the fire. The letter was from Arya, now Sir Arya of Winterfell, recently returned from a riding circuit of the Riverlands. She wrote of peace in the villages, of full markets, of roads safer than she had seen since childhood. She reported how the small folk of the western marches had begun repairing bridges, trading surplus grain to the Lannister towns, how even the Ironborn, kept close by a wary Edric Storm, now honored the peace more often than not. Yet the realm's peace was as delicate as spun glass. There were rumors of old grievances, of pirates massing in the stepstones, of a bloodless coup brewing in far Dorne. Lyanna listened, hands folded in her lap. Her gaze focused past the flames to the faces of her children gathered at her feet. Aegon, grown tall and broad-shouldered, bright-eyed Elia, and little Beric, the third she had fostered, a child sent by Lord Tully as a gesture of alliance. Their voices, full of hope and eager questions, gave her reason to hope that peace might endure, if only for their generation. Rhaegar set aside his harp, which he had been softly tuning, and asked Luwin to pass him the letter. He read it with a gentle frown, then passed it to Lyanna. Their eyes met, and she saw the same worry and resolve she had known in him since the day she killed the Mad King. "We must remain vigilant," he said quietly. "Even a realm at peace will birth new ambitions, new enemies." Ned, his hair now white at the temples and his bearing unchanged, nodded. "Our fathers thought peace impossible too. Perhaps it always is. Perhaps peace is only a chain of small truces, held together by constant effort and a measure of luck." "Luck favors the prepared," Lyanna replied, her northern bluntness now burnished by years of rule. "Let us prepare then. Send riders to the coast and the marshes. I want every rumor heard before it grows into trouble. Then to you." As the children ran off, Aegon to the training yard, Elia to the rookery, Beric to his books, Catelyn joined Lyanna at the window. Together they watched the last leaves fall. The silence between them was easy, the silence of women who had faced war, betrayal, and heartache, and emerged tempered but not broken. "I did not imagine we would come so far, when first you left for the south," Cat admitted. Lyanna smiled softly. "Nor did I. Some days it feels as if I am still that reckless girl, riding under moonlight with nothing but stubbornness and a stolen horse. Other days I wake and find the years pressing on my shoulders, heavier than any armor." "Bain?" Catelyn slipped an arm around her. "Heavier but also warmer. The realm is better for your burdens, Lyanna." The court of Winterfell had changed. No longer just a northern stronghold. It was now a seat of counsel and learning. Lords' sons and daughters from across the kingdoms were fostered in its halls, learning the old gods' wisdom and the ways of snow and patience. Maesters and septons taught letters beside wildlings who shared stories of survival and song. Merchants from Bravos, Pentos, and Norvos brought silk, spices, and news, drawn by the reputation of the Lady of Winterfell, the woman who killed a king and ended a war. But not all were content. From the east came ravens with cryptic warnings, Bravos uneasy about the stability of Westeros, Mirish and Valentine spies probing the coast. From the west, rumors that Lord Jaime's second son coveted the rock, impatient with the slow pace of council rule. From the south, tales that a new faceless man moved among the Dornish ports, gathering secrets. A council session was called in Winterfell's Great Hall. Lords and ladies filled the benches, the Regency's remaining pillars. Lyanna, Ned, Jon Arryn's widow, now Lady Regent of the Vale, and Mace Tyrell's son, sat at the high table. Rhaegar, ever content to advise but never rule, lingered at Lyanna's side, his harp in his lap, listening with eyes the color of old silver. A lord from the Reach complained bitterly of Dornish merchants refusing to pay the new grain tariff. The Ironborn's envoy pressed for more ships, and a promise that the North would never again close its harbors to Greyjoy trade. The Bravosi envoy, sleek and subtle, requested repayment of old debts in advance, a thinly veiled threat. Through it all, Lyanna let the voices clash and compete, her face a mask of serene attentiveness. At last she stood, silencing the hall with nothing more than her presence. "You all know the cost of peace," she said, voice echoing to the rafters. "It is not only gold, or ships, or grain. It is trust. Won with difficulty, lost with carelessness. If you wish for tariffs, you must offer fair roads in return. If you wish for ships, you must defend the harbors with your own steel. not just your neighbors. If you wish to call in old debts, remember who paid in blood when the dragons and the wolves made truce. We are one realm, or we are nothing. No. Her words carried the gravity of hard-won wisdom. Some bristled. Old rivals from the Vale and Stormlands grumbled. But others nodded, recalling the carnage of the last war. The debate shifted from accusation to compromise. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Rhaegar joined her on the dais. He brushed a strand of hair from her brow. You speak as a queen, though you wear no crown. Lyanna leaned her head against his shoulder. Crowns are heavy. I'd rather wear wolf fur. He smiled, the line of his jaw softer than it had once been. Wolves do not rule alone. Even the lone wolf, if wise, knows when to call the pack. The following winter was harsh. Storms battered the coast, and the shivering sea froze as far south as White Harbor. Wolves grew bold. Flocks vanished from the outlying farms. Aegon led hunting parties, bringing down great white stags and the occasional wolf, but hunger still gnawed at the lowest and weakest. Lyanna rode out with a household guard to oversee the distribution of grain. She visited the poorest villages, breaking bread in longhouses, giving coins to the sick and old. The children followed her, wide-eyed, and the bards sang her praises in fireside songs. Lyanna of the Wolf, Lady of the North, who fed the hungry and kept the peace. Yet even as snow fell, and the wind howled, rumors swirled of old shadows in the dark. One evening, as she returned from a distant hamlet, a party of riders wearing no colors blocked her path. The leader's voice was harsh with the South, a hedge knight or outlaw perhaps. Lady Stark, he called. The time for wolves and dragons is past. The realm wants a king, not a council. Lyanna's hand fell to the dagger at her waist, but her voice was calm. Who speaks for the realm? A masked rider on a snowy road? A king in the south, he sneered. And another in the west if you want yield. You think the Iron Throne can be left empty forever? She smiled, cold and sharp. I think it is better empty than in the hands of those who would rule by force alone. Go home, sir, before you freeze. When he reached for his sword, her guard closed ranks. Lyanna drew her own blade, meeting the man's eyes without fear. Do not force my hand, she said, and the steel in her tone was enough. He spat, turned his horse, and vanished into the snow. That night, Rhaegar found her standing alone in the Godswood, the moonlight pale on her face. Would you have killed him? He asked. She answered with a sigh. If I must. I will never shed blood for pride again, Rhaegar, but I will defend what we have built. One. He took her hands in his. You do not have to fight alone. I never have, she whispered. With spring came new challenges. The Great Council met again, this time in King's Landing. The city now green with new growth and laughter, its scars almost hidden beneath the splendor of commerce and song. The heirs, Aegon, Edric Storm and Aelia, sat at the high table with Lyanna and the regents. Word arrived that a rebellion had flared in the far west. Lord Crakehall, long resentful of council rule, had declared himself king of the Westerlands, rallying old foes of the Lannisters to his banner. His cause was weak, but his men were fierce, and the bloodshed threatened to draw in neighbors. Lyanna called for patience. Send envoys. Offer pardon for his men if they lay down arms. Remind Lord Crakehall that every rebellion sows chaos for his own kin. Rhaegar added, a show of force may be needed, but let it come with mercy. Ned led the diplomatic mission, his name and reputation a shield against violence. Arya rode at his side, her sword and wit as sharp as ever. They met with Crakehall, who, faced with overwhelming opposition and the prospect of exile, surrendered. His men were spared, and order restored with little blood spilled. The council praised Lyanna's wisdom, and she accepted it with her usual modesty. But she knew each victory was temporary, that peace must be renewed with every sunrise. That summer, as the heat shimmered on the fields and the rivers ran swift and cold, Lyanna and Rhaegar hosted a feast for all the lords and ladies of the realm at Winterfell. Banners of every color adorned the walls. Tables groaned with roast meats and sweetbreads, wine from Arbor and mead from the north. The hall resounded with laughter, the music of harp and flute, the patter of dancing feet. Elia, grown into a woman of wit and grace, danced with Aegon and Edric both, her laughter ringing like bells. Arya, now a commander in her own right, told tales of her journeys across the realm. Of pirates in the stepstones, of the ghostly ships of the shivering sea, of the wildlings beyond the wall who had sworn peace with the north. Sansa presided over the feast, her beauty and courtesy now famous even in distant Essos, her children watching with pride as their mother kept order among high and low alike. As the night wore on and torches guttered low, Lyanna found herself walking the walls with Rhaegar, the air cool against her cheeks, the stars sharp above. "We have done much," he said softly, his hand in hers. "Much, but not enough," she replied. "There will always be new troubles, new ambitions, new wrongs to right." He squeezed her hand. "Then let us face them together." She smiled, leaning against him as they looked out over the land that had cost so much and given so much more. Below, the feast continued. Children and adults, lords and peasants, all dancing in a hall that had once been a fortress against the world, and was now, for one night, the heart of it. In the years that followed, Lyanna's name became legend. Songs were sung of her ride south to end the Mad King, of her rule that had forged a fragile, stubborn peace. The North remained loyal, proud of the wolf who had tamed the dragon. The South respected her wisdom and justice. Even the Ironborn grudgingly honored her, for she had never allowed herself to become their enemy, but always demanded their respect. Rhaegar, once haunted by prophecy and loss, found peace in the North's cold embrace. His children, and those Lyanna fostered, grew to adulthood as friends and equals, learning from one another, forging bonds across blood and house that no war could break. The realm endured drought, famine, plague, and the occasional skirmish. Each time, Lyanna led the council with a steady hand, balancing mercy with discipline, hope with realism. She never called herself queen, but when she died, old and gray and smiling beneath the boughs of the heart tree, the lords and small folk alike wept for the wolf queen who had never worn a crown. Her children carried on her legacy. Aegon ruled as first regent, with Edric and Elia as his closest advisors, and Arya as the shield of the realm. Together, they kept the council and the realm strong, remembering always that peace was not a gift, but a labor, one purchased anew by every generation. So the story of Lyanna Stark, the wolf who slew a dragon and saved a realm, was passed down through the ages. Mothers named their daughters for her. Bards sang of her courage. And every year, on the night the snows first fell, the children of Winterfell gathered beneath the heart tree to listen to the story of the girl who chose mercy over vengeance, peace over pride, and built a kingdom that outlasted even the longest winter. And in the deep silence of the Godswood, as the wind whispered through the red leaves, it seemed to those who believed that Lyanna's spirit lingered, watching, always, over the land she had loved enough to save. Oh yeah. Snow fell over Winterfell as gentle as old regrets, draping the stone and earth in an endless hush. The northern sky, pearl gray and vast, stretched above the battlements as Lyanna's grandchildren played at swordfighting in the yard, the clang of wooden blades echoing off the frost-blanketed walls. Lyanna Stark's memory had become legend now, woven into the very fabric of the North, whispered in every hearth and honored at every feast. Yet the work she had begun, the fragile, stubborn peace she had brokered, endured as more than memory. It had taken root, sending out new shoots into every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. In the solar, sunlight struck fire from the stained glass, illuminating the council table where Aegon, now gray at the temples and calm of voice, sat at the head beside Elia of Dorne and Edric Storm, Lord of Storm's End. The great council had evolved, a body not of regents, but of stewards, guiding each region with a hand that was steady, not grasping. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, sat to Aegon's left, wisdom and warmth in her bearing. Arya, her hair shot with silver, but her gaze still sharp, watched from a seat near the fire, one leg slung over the arm of her chair, ever the wolf among courtiers. Children clustered in corners, Sansa's, Arya's, Aegon's own. A new generation was being raised in the lessons Lyanna had carved into the stone of Winterfell. Each taught to value the weight of mercy over the empty crown of conquest. Each schooled in the hard wisdom of endurance. Outside, the banners of 100 houses whipped and fluttered in the cold wind. This was a rare council at Winterfell, the lords and ladies of the realm traveling north for the centenary of Lyanna's birth. The city had grown, a new ring of wooden cottages encircling the old walls, fields tilled where once there had been only wild grass and bones. Merchants from Old Town, Lannisport, Sunspear, and Bravos thronged the market. There were lanterns strung along every lane, children's games and music in the air, and stories shared at night beneath great bonfires. Stories of the days when the Mad King died and the North had changed the world. Aegon rose, the hall falling quiet at once. He lifted a cup of northern mead, its gold catching the sun. "My grandmother," he said, "taught us that peace is not a gift, but a burden we must choose, every day, every hour. Today, we honor her memory, not just with song and story, but by renewing the vows she once won for us all. May this realm remain unbroken, this council unbowed, and this land ever ruled by the wisdom of mercy and the courage of the wolf." The room erupted in a cheer. Sansa pressed a hand to her heart, tears shining in her eyes. Arya grinned, and even Edric, usually reserved, allowed himself a broad, genuine smile. As the feast began, servants moved among the guests with venison, bread, and mulled wine. Children wove between the tables, snatching sweet cakes and bits of cheese, their laughter as bright as bells. The walls of Winterfell, old and scarred, rang with new music. In the shadow of the godswood, beyond the revelry, a girl named Lyanna, named for her grandmother, stood with her cousin Jon, her breath curling in the cold air. She was a Stark in every line, black hair, gray eyes, tall and strong, though she bore the pale skin and quick smile of her Dornish kin. "Do you think she really did it?" Jon asked, tracing a pattern in the snow with his boot. "Did she truly kill the Mad King, just like the singers say?" Lyanna smiled. "You doubt it?" "I don't know," he said. "It seems impossible." "She did what no one else dared," Lyanna answered, her voice quiet but fierce. "She saved the realm when everyone else would have burned it." They looked up at the heart tree, its red leaves stark against the snow, and for a moment both felt the old magic that lingered in the north, the certainty that the past was never truly gone, that the courage of one woman could shape the fate of 100 generations. A bell tolled from the first keep, calling the guests to the ancient courtyard. It was time for the remembrance, a ritual born in the years after the last war. The lords and ladies gathered beneath the open sky, children bundled in furs, candles flickering in gloved hands. The council stood together, Aegon, Aelia, Edric, Sansa, Arya, and the youngest heirs, while the old Septon recited the vow that Lyanna had written herself so many years before. "In the sight of gods and men, we remember that peace is the labor of the living, not the inheritance of the dead. We swear to listen before striking, to weigh justice before vengeance, and to hold the innocent safe from the fury of the mighty." "Nani? Demel one." The candles were raised, the words repeated by hundreds of voices, and the flames shimmered together, defying the wind. That night, as snow thickened outside, Arya slipped away from the feast and made her way along the battlements, her wolf shadow beside her. She paused above the gatehouse, scanning the white hills beyond, as if half expecting to see trouble on the horizon. But there was only the vast silence of winter, broken by the distant howl of wolves. She thought of Lyanna, her sister in all but name, and wondered what the woman would say now, seeing the North at peace, the council strong, the realm more united than in living memory. Arya's thoughts turned to the road she had traveled, from the green fields of the Riverlands to the frozen steppe of the far north, to the dark waters of Bravos. She knew, better than most, how easily peace could falter, how every festival hid old wounds and secret hungers. She closed her eyes and breathed in the cold. "We are still watching, Lyanna," she whispered. "We remember. In King's Landing, word of the centenary reached the small council. The city had changed. The Red Keep was now only the seat of the council, its throne room left empty, but for the banners of every great house. The old iron throne remained untouched, its blades rusted, its seat draped in wolf pelts and garlands of winter roses every anniversary of Lyanna's death. Pilgrims came to lay flowers, some in reverence, some in awe, and a few in bitter remembrance of what might have been. The markets thrived. The city walls were strong, and the faith had become a voice among many, no longer a power above the law. The maesters chronicled the realm's story, and a new class of merchants and craftsmen kept the city rich. King's Landing was still restless, still dangerous, but less cruel than it had been when kings played their bloody games upon the throne. The council met, arguing trade, law, and justice. Its leader, a sharp-eyed woman of Lannister descent, read a letter from Winterfell, then smiled at her colleague. "Let us hope the North's peace lasts another 100 years," she said. The years unfolded as they always did. Slowly, then all at once. In the Riverlands, Sansa's eldest, Robur, built a bridge that joined two quarreling towns. In Dorne, Elias' daughter rode to Bravos as an envoy, learning the language of the free cities. Edric's son built ships that patrolled the narrow sea, keeping pirates at bay. Each child, in their own way, tried to live up to the legends they had inherited. Some succeeded, some fell short. When strife came, a bitter harvest, a contested border, a smuggler's war on the stepstones, the council gathered, debated, compromised. No one ruled alone, and no one ruled forever. It was not always easy. Old resentments sometimes flared, and once or twice, the council nearly splintered over questions of faith or fortune. But when the debates threatened to turn to violence, one of the elders, Arya, Edric, or Sansa, would remind them of Lyanna's vow, and the council would settle wiser and warier. In the north, the winters grew harder as Lyanna herself aged. She walked the walls less often, and spent more time in the library in Godswood, teaching her namesake to ride and to rule, to wield a sword but also a quill. "You must remember," she told her granddaughter, "that the realm is not a beast to be mastered, but a garden to be tended. It will thrive only so long as you care for every root and leaf, not just the flowers you like best." The young Lyanna listened, her eyes as gray as the winter sky, and promised to try. The lessons of peace she learned were never finished. One last spring, with the snows receding and the lakes thawing, the old council gathered in the Godswood, sitting in a circle beneath the heart tree. Arya, her hair now white, was the last to arrive, leaning on a carved cane. Sansa began, her voice trembling with memory and age. "We built something rare, and we have kept it longer than anyone believed possible. The world has changed, but there is still danger." Elia nodded. "But hope, too. My grandchildren play with yours beneath these boughs." Aegon looked at Lyanna, the girl, and then at Arya. "Will it last?" Arya grinned. "It will, if you remember what was lost to win it, and if you teach your children to remember too." They sat in silence, the heart tree above them, the future before them, uncertain but bright. In the hush of the Godswood, with the crows calling in the branches, it seemed to them as if Lyanna Stark herself watched and approved. Years later, long after the last of the old council had gone to rest beneath the heart tree, a boy rode north from White Harbor, a book of songs strapped to his saddle. He was a singer's son, with hair the color of ash and eyes the color of dawn, and he sought Winterfell because he had heard stories of a woman who had saved the realm. When he reached the gate, he was met by Lady Lyanna, tall and proud, with her grandmother's gray eyes. "Why do you come?" she asked, curious. He bowed. "To see if the stories are true, to learn if peace can really last." She smiled, ushering him into the yard. "Come then. The walls remember. The stones remember. And I," she placed a hand over her heart, "I remember most of all." So it was that the tale of Lyanna Stark endured, not in crowns or thrones, but in the lives of her kin, the laughter of children, the wisdom of counsel, and the peace that blossomed, however briefly, in the snows of the north. For as long as there were wolves in Winterfell, and a heart tree to witness, Her memory kindled hope in the darkest winter, and reminded all who followed that mercy, once chosen, could outlast even the bitterest storm. Oh, and no. The long years after Lyanna Stark's death moved as quietly as the northern winds, slow but unstoppable, reshaping the realm as stone is shaped by water and time. Winterfell's halls echoed with new voices, children, grandchildren, the sons and daughters of lords, merchants, and even wildlings who came south and swore the old vows for the chance to raise their own beneath the ancient banners. The Stark words had gained a deeper meaning. The North remembers, yes, but also, the North endures. Snow covered the godswood most of the year, but there were always flowers at the base of the heart tree, offerings for the Wolf Queen who had never worn a crown. The old stories had grown into legend. Lyanna who slew the Mad King, Lyanna who united council and commoner, Lyanna who taught her kin that peace was a burden and a gift, never a certainty. When children sat at their grandparents' knees and asked how the realm survived, after dragons and lions and storms all raged, the answer was always the same. We remembered her vow. We chose mercy, and we held fast. The council at Winterfell now held more than nobles. Elected representatives from every region, lords and small folk alike, sat with the new Lady Stark, Lyanna's namesake, at the high table. The Great Keep was a seat of law and learning, a forge for policy and justice. Banners from Dorne, the Vale, the Reach, the Westerlands, even the Iron Islands and the Free Cities, all flew together on council days. Merchants filled the market, singers and poets traded verses with septons and maesters, and the kitchens prepared fare for hundreds. For the guest right Lyanna herself had enforced now applied not only to lords, but to all who crossed Winterfell's threshold. Arya Stark's descendants, lean, quick, wild-eyed, served as the council's hands and eyes across the realm. The Riverland sent two voices, one noble, one miller's son Dachi. Dorne's envoys changed with the seasons, each bringing a new tale, a new alliance, or a new challenge. Elia of Dorne's grandchildren were often at Winterfell, teaching the northern children to dance and sing in the Dornish style, their laughter warming the coldest days. Sansa's lineage guided law and trade, ensuring that the mistakes of old kings, hoarding, spite, broken promises, did not return. The council's leader was Lady Lyanna II, a woman with her namesake's will and her father Aegon's silver-streaked hair. She had been raised from the cradle on stories of the old wars and the hard-won peace. Her voice could be gentle or flint-hard, and she listened longer than she spoke. When problems arose, a dispute over pasture, a raid by pirates, a crop blight, or a feud between two ancient houses, she called for witnesses, weighed the claims, and ruled only when she was sure she'd heard every side. It was said that the worst lie one could tell was one told before the heart tree. She had her council meet there whenever the matter was grave. Her cousin Jon, Sansa's grandson, was her marshal, tall and straight-backed, a man who wore his sword as a reminder, not a threat. He had served on the Wall and knew hardship, patience, and loyalty. Edric Storm's granddaughter, bold and clever, sat as master of ships and trade, her voice carrying news from King's Landing, Old Town, and the Free Cities. Once, a lord of the Westerlands challenged Lady Lyanna's ruling in open council, demanding the old laws of succession be restored, and threatening to break from the realm if his claim was denied. The council chamber stilled as the man's words echoed off the stone. Lyanna stood, her eyes as gray as a wolf's, and spoke. "If you seek only to win, not to serve, then you do not belong here. If you wish to secede, you may, but know that the peace you abandon is the peace your children will beg for when the world grows cold again. Stay and build with us. Leave, and you are welcome only as guest, not lord." Nah. The room had held its breath as the old lion blustered, and then, faced with the cold and the hundreds of eyes upon him, yielded. Later, the tale spread across the 7 kingdoms, and for a time, the lords remembered that the council was not a game, but the only thing standing between plenty and ruin. But peace was never bloodless. In the east, The free cities watched Westeros with hungry eyes. Braavos grew wary of the realm's growing trade. Endless sent whispers to pirates along the narrow sea. The council responded with ships, not swords, sending trade envoys and promising safe passage for Braavosi goods. When pirates struck, Lady Edric led the fleet herself, outwitting their captains, capturing their flagships, and returning their crews alive but penniless. She told the council, "Mercy shows our strength. Fear makes more enemies than gold ever buys." Winter remained the North's true challenge. The council stockpiled grain, rebuilt the old hot springs that once saved Winterfell from famine, and sent aid south each year. It was a winter without end, a test of every lesson Lyanna Stark had left them. Some years, famine crept close, but the council system held. Even the poorest villages sent delegates to Winterfell to plead their case, and no child starved who could be reached. In King's Landing, the small council, now a body of elected officials, merchants, and minor nobles, continued to send letters to Winterfell for advice, for mediation, or more often, to boast of their own successes. The Red Keep remained the capital in name, but the realm's heart was now in the north. On the 100th anniversary of the peace, every house sent its banners north. Lords and ladies, merchants and sailors, wildlings and knights, all came to honor the Wolf Queen. The Godswood was festooned with winter roses, and for 3 days and nights, feasts, games, and debates filled every hall and courtyard. Lyanna's stories were sung in the Great Hall, and the oldest of the council, Arya's last surviving daughter, nearly 90, her eyes bright with mischief, told the tale of how her aunt had ridden south alone and faced a mad king for the sake of a brother, a lover, and a world that could be better. At the closing of the feast, the council gathered beneath the heart tree. Each member from every region placed a stone at the tree's roots, some painted, some carved, some plain, each a symbol of the vow. To listen before striking, to value mercy before vengeance, to see all the realm's children as their own. The flames of 1,000 candles flickered in the snow, their light falling on the names carved into the old wood. Lyanna, Eddard, Rhaegar, Sansa, Arya, Elia, Edric, Aegon. Lady Lyanna II led the vow. Her voice carried through the cold air, strong and steady. For all who come after, we remember. We choose the harder path, and we endure. As the years slipped by, a new threat rose. Not from swords, but from within. A group of discontented lords and wealthy merchants began to whisper that the council was too slow, too cautious, too focused on mercy when what was needed was strength. They plotted to form a king's party, hoping to resurrect the old monarchy. Their arguments were tempting: quick decisions, a single strong leader, the return of pomp and spectacle. At first, the council dismissed them, but the whispers grew. Some younger nobles, hungry for glory, joined them. Some merchants, stymied by slow reforms, offered gold. The king's party grew bolder, seeding unrest in the south and among old Stormlander families. Petitions arrived at Winterfell, asking for reforms, faster action, a new order. Lady Lyanna summoned the council and the leaders of the king's party. In the Godswood, beneath the heart tree, she asked them to state their case. Their spokesman, a young lord from the Vale, argued that a single king could answer threats swiftly and command the loyalty of every house. Lyanna listened, her expression unreadable. She turned to the others: Edric's descendant, Aelias, Arya's kin, Sansa's, and dozens of new voices, smiths, healers, former wildlings. "We were born from fire and blood," Lyanna said. "Kings brought us ruin, then a queen taught us to build. If you want a king, you may have him, but only if the realm chooses him freely." She called a vote. Open, fair, every council seat, every region, every trade guild. The debate raged for months. Songs were sung, arguments traded in every marketplace and keep. Ballots arrived from every corner of the realm. The final tally came on the first day of spring. By a margin narrower than any council vote before, the realm rejected the return of kingship. There were those who grumbled, who plotted, but most accepted the outcome. Lyanna spoke to the council. If we are to survive, we must let the realm choose again and again. Peace is not a thing finished. It is a question, and our answer must always be renewed. The king's party faded, some joining the council, others returning to private life. A few, exiled, went east to seek fortunes in the free cities, but none gained enough support to threaten the realm. As Lady Lyanna grew old, she taught her grandchildren the lessons that had guided her life: to see the small folk as kin, to honor every oath, to wield justice without cruelty, and never to forget that peace is work, not a gift. When she died, the whole realm mourned. Banners were lowered, bells rang, and every child in Winterfell planted a flower at the base of the heart tree. The council, for the first time, elected a leader not from the noble houses, but a merchant's daughter, a woman who had risen from the streets of Lannisport and become a champion of the poor. It was a sign that Lyanna's vision, once thought radical, had taken root. Under her, the council continued. There were hard years, famine, wildfires, foreign plots, but the realm endured. When threats came, the council met, the votes were counted, and the old stories were told once more. The North remained the heart, the old gods ever watching. On long winter nights, children gathered at the feet of the heart tree to hear the stories. How a girl from Winterfell changed the world, how she chose mercy, and how, by holding fast to her vow, she taught a kingdom to save itself. In the quiet of the gods' wood, beneath red leaves and snow, the voices of generations murmured their gratitude, their hope, their promise to endure. The North remembered, and in that memory was the seed of every spring, the hope of every peace, and the whisper of Lyanna's name on every wind that passed over Winterfell's ancient stones.